Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 5th meeting of the Hyde Park Planning Board. Please take note of the exits around the room, and now join us as we pledge allegiance to the American flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we begin, I want to make a quick housekeeping note because our administrative assistant had some questions on this. Originally, the first item on the agenda would have been a continued public hearing for Lumen's solar farm, as it was known. In the interim, the owners withdrew the application, which automatically ends the public hearing. There's been some question as from the applicants themselves as to whether this was a legitimate move. And I just wanted to go on record as stating that the owner of the site is always the applicant. Typically, when development is proposed, you'll have a contract between the person proposing development. The contract is usually predicated on receiving planning board approval. Up until that point, because who's going to buy a property if you don't know you're going to get to the planning board? So up until that point, even though the owners have allowed someone else to represent them, the owners are still the applicant. If the owners withdraw the application, then for the purposes of our review, it's gone. This doesn't happen usually or often. It's because through contract law, you would have a lawsuit very easily going on between the owner of the site as well as the applicant, or I should say, the proposed user. In this case, that's not relevant to us, and that's why there's no public hearing on this application. And for those who might be watching at home, it has been withdrawn. It remains to be seen as to whether or not it'll come back. In the meantime, the first continued public hearing is NICHOLS Oxygen property, located at 1564 Route 9G. May I have a motion to reopen the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So this is, for those who've been watching or listening, this is an easy application to us. It allows some empty buildings to be utilized for auto sales, et cetera. We are down to nothing more than waiting on DOT or some negotiations with the Department of Transportation regarding their idea that you should close a curb cut and your hope that that wouldn't occur. Do you want to update us on where you are with DOT?
We continue to have no luck in convincing the DOT that 2 driveways is acceptable. And Ray and I have been reaching out just this week to a few other people trying to see if we can get any movement on that, and to no luck. So at this time, we will, submit the plans with closing the north entrance with a concrete curb and planting grass behind it in the previous pavement area.
Because the submission date would be, for the next meeting would be tomorrow or yesterday, I believe, the board could consider making that a condition that you would submit plans for my signature or the chair's signature that would show an approved DOT new entrance rather than making you turn on a dime that quickly. Would that work for you guys? I know Mr. Nichols is interested in trying to get his tenant in quickly, and I think that would save some time maybe.
Yeah, if we can do that, that'd be helpful.
That would give you time to negotiate with DOT exactly what they want. And also, just for the record, we received an email correspondence from, I believe, a neighbor who'd been watching on television that the site is used for school emergency, something about FDR. Mr. Sotero contacted, and I'm forgetting his name, but the director of operations at the school district, who said that officially they had no problem with it being closed to one curb cut, in essence. Yes.
I talked to
Thank you, Paul.
the head of transportation, and he talked to Mr. Bloom, which is the head of safety and all the good stuff they do over there. Mr. Bloom told him that we're considered, like if the North Park School was blown up or really disastrous, that area would be used for parking because that's the closest large area of parking. All right. So I haven't got a letter from Mr. Bloom, but I'm sure I can get one. So we're down the food chain if you want, but we're still in the list, okay? And that's the guy that runs all the safety and school stuff. I did talk to Mr. Sassy from the DOT today. it's what it is. We need to submit the plans as soon as we can. He will look at them. He will work to get it approved as fast as he can. And we talked about a few things like the road's gone up 9 inches since then, and so forth and so on. And you know, it's years. Okay.
In other words, it looks simple on paper to change, but it's a little more complicated in real life.
Yeah, it probably will be, but, and, you know, we told him that, you know, he was talking about having just one entrance, the whole thing ripped out and start over again. I says, that could cost $50,000-$60,000 or more. And I told him about closing the north entrance. He said, I need to see the plans, but it sounds like a viable thing. Put a curb and some grass between it, and then they, you know, make sure the drainage is gonna be good and the line of sight and all that. But the line of sights are there now, so, that's all right. If we could get,
As I said, anything that if we were to wait for your plans, this would all be DOT driven anyway, so
yeah.
I'll ask the board to see what their opinion is as well, and I'll also ask the consultants when we go over to them. Anything else new you want to add?
No, I just need to get it done.
Ms. Axelson, comments?
Well, our last set of comments, April 15, I think we talked about at a planning board meeting. Obviously, if there's a submittal to try to address some or all of those comments, I would do my best to try to review and turn it around as quickly as possible.
I can have that response to Cynthia tomorrow in PDF, and I could send it to you guys. I've made all the
I think you're-
corrections and
I-
responded to your letter, just waiting for this last piece. So I can email that to you guys tomorrow.
So if you can make a new submission, then that'll reduce the number of conditions that we'll
Bless you.
have. Anything else? Mr. Learn?
We don't have anything new to add on the engineering side.
Thank you. It's nice to have you here in place of Mr. Sotero, and you're
Nice
looking
to be
very
here.
tanned and fit tonight. Ms. Polidoro?
No comments.
Would you agree that we could make this, we could word the condition accordingly to allow DOT and the applicant to work together?
Because DOT is the driver of what the entrance is going to look like, we can word the condition so that they have to come back. The final plan set that you're going to sign is going to show the DOT approved entrance.
Thank you. Ms. Weiser, comments?
I have no comments.
Mr. Pickett?
No comment.
Ms. Wasser?
I support the plan to approve a contingent on the DOT approval.
Thank you. Ms. Dexter?
I concur with my colleague.
Mr. Oliver?
Me as well. Anything we can do to help the applicant get through this as quick as he can for his new tenant would be helpful. Thank you.
Would anyone from the public like to speak about this application? There being none, I need to adjourn this to the next meeting so that we can receive the new information, the new plans, and the responses. So making a motion to adjourn this to June 19th.
So moved?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, and we'll see your
So you
plans.
you want the revised plans without the curb?
Yeah,
in
that's,
there?
so if you'll send us that tomorrow, then we can start reviewing it, and that way, because, I mean, we could make conditions based on Liz's last memo. We already addressed them. Let's just knock those conditions out of the way and have as
Okay.
few as possible.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to like type up the conditions, and then Tad's got to check them. It's better to just get rid
So
of
do you
them.
want the normal amount of paper copies submitted?
I don't need paper.
I was going to say, I think, board members, would you all like to see new big paper sets?
No.
Not big one.
I don't need big ones.
Half size, just one big one for me, one big one for the file, one for the consultants. That's it. So four normal size, the rest small size. 11 by 17.
Okay, so you still want all those, even though we're going to have to make them again for the final with the DOT?
I hope you don't have to make that many again. The board,
Okay.
these people don't see the final plans.
Yeah, the last copy will only be seen by the chair and the engineer when you come back in for signature.
And the copy I receive is just from my signature, and then it goes into the permanent records file.
So once you put this in, then we can occupy the building.
Can't hear.
Can you speak up?
So at the next meeting, the board will consider approving the plan that Paul's going to submit tomorrow with the condition that DOT approve of whatever you're going to do to that entryway. So then once you have that approval and any other conditions have been met, then you can pull a building permit.
You're not pulling a building permit, are you?
No need to.
Oh,
No
well,
need to. We haven't changed the
then,
building.
then,
It's just the curb cut.
It's just the curb cut and the installation of a tree and a few other,
Yeah.
like striping, that's
And the
about it.
sign.
then they can do the work.
So, yes,
Tree's ready to go.
yes. You're welcome. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is continued public hearing for ATHANAS East Solar Farm. May I get a motion to reopen the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This is located at 1436 Route 9G. It's been referred to other agencies as well as county planning who had comments, basically local concern. We've been through this process a lot. I want to thank the applicants again for responding to our comments with each iteration and doing really diligent follow-through. That's a compliment to you specifically, because we had a couple of other consultants on this that didn't seem to make it move forward as quickly or as thoroughly. I believe we're prepared to take action tonight based on all the changes that have been made and revised. But overall, I think that this, as we first noted in our first time to meet with this application, this is the easiest or the easier of many of the solar farms that we had. The area was already cleared out. You're just removing a little bit of trees in different corners. Otherwise, it was fairly easy. You're using an existing farm road that already crosses a fairly a wetland area, semi-stream that's only inundated periodically. And we also know that once you have everything going, there's very little traffic going to the site back and forth. So is that a good enough summation for you? Thank you. Consultants, any further comments? Ms. Axelson?
We issued a review June 3, 2019, and all of our remaining comments are being addressed as conditions of approval in the draft resolution. So, no, that's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Learn?
We have nothing new to add.
Ms. Polidoro?
We have a draft resolution with several conditions of approval. Most of them relate to the decommissioning plan and the pilot agreement.
So just for the audience's edification, we have a law specifically designed for site plan applications and special use permit for solar arrays. It does detail in a way that's more specific than if they just came in through the public utility use under site plans. And part of that is to negotiate with the town board a payment in lieu of taxes as well as a decommissioning plan. And typically those don't start until you get through with our board, which is why they're going to be conditions. So let me start to my right. Mr. Oliver, any other comments?
I have no more comments. Thank you.
Ms. Dexter?
Nope, nothing here.
Ms. Wasser?
No additional comments.
Mr. Pickett?
No comment.
And Ms. Weiser?
Not here.
Would anyone from the public like to speak about this application? There being no comment, may I have a motion to close the public hearing?
May I make
Second.
one little add? Oh, sorry.
Before I say all in favor, further discussion?
No, go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Yes, Liz?
So before the meeting, Dana and I were discussing the issue of emergency contact, which I advised her would be somebody related to the solar farm operation that is relatively local, so that if emergency responders have to go out. I assume that's what the code intends.
I will assume that as well.
Okay.
Someone does come out periodically to check on the site, as well as to check on, I think, the inverters, the condition of the inverters, so that would probably be the appropriate contact person.
That's all, sorry about that.
No, thank you. Who has this resolution?
I do.
This is the long one, sorry.
Town of Hyde Park Planning Board. Resolution granting conditional site plan and special use permit approval. ATHANAS East Solar Farm, June 5th, 2019, resolution number 2018-12B, whereas now therefore it be resolved that the board makes the following findings pursuant to section 108-8.4 of the zoning law. The project will comply with the applicable requirements of Articles 4 and 5 of the zoning law and will be consistent with the purposes of the Greenbelt District. Solar farms are an expressly permitted use within the district. 2, the project will be consistent with the purposes of the zoning law. 3, the project will not result in excessive off-premises noise, dust, odors, solid waste, or glare, or create any public or private nuisances. The project will maintain a vegetative buffer along the property line on the site and will supplement the buffer with Norway spruce and eastern white pine to further screen the view of the project. Once constructed, the project will not create any excessive noise, dust, or odors. 4, the project will not cause significant traffic congestion, impair pedestrian safety, or overload existing roads. After construction, the project will generate very little traffic as there will be no employees at the site. 5, The project will be suitable for the proposed action considering the property's size, location, topography, vegetation, soils, natural habitat, hydrology, and its ability to be screened from neighboring properties and public roads. The site is screened from the road and the neighboring properties by a natural wooded buffer as well as additional plantings. Potential impacts to water are addressed by erosion control and landscaping plans. Potential impacts to wildlife, including the Blandings turtle, are addressed by plan notations regarding free tree clearing, lighting, dust control, construction timing, fencing, and monitoring. The solar farm is a low-impact use which is consistent with neighboring uses. 6, the project has been designated to ensure compatibility with the surrounding uses and to protect the natural, historic, and scenic resources of the town. Be it further resolved that the planning board hereby approves the site plan and grants a special use permit for the project as shown on the site plan and authorizes the chairperson or his authorized designee to sign the site plan after compliance with the following conditions. Hold on. 1, payment of all fees in escrow. 2, revision of site plans sheet C-601 to add the symbol for chain link security fence to show a complete enclosure in the southwestern corner of the array labeled as A-1.2. 3, revision of site plan sheet C-502 and detail 3C-502 to complete the warning and guidance markings pursuant to town code. What did you say that? Section 130-7H1, 130-8B, by including the manufacturer's and installer's identification, the emergency responder, and other contact information. Revision of site plan sheet C-501 to complete the plan view and the details of the proposed equipment pursuant to Town Code Section 130-8C, including all equipment elements with dimensions, height, materials, colors, and any enclosures. Approval of a decommissioning agreement by the Town of Hyde Park Town Board. 6, revision of the estimate of the decommissioning cost to delete the reference to salvage value and net cost. 7, review by the Planning Board's consulting engineer of the revised estimate of decommissioning costs prior to consideration of the forthcoming decommissioning agreement. 8, revision of the site plan sheet C-202, note 2, regarding areas disturbed within the array to specify the use of New York State No. 6 conservation seed mix with the addition of a bird's foot, trefoil, and clover. 9, revision of site plan sheet C-202, note 3, regarding grassed areas to state that the site will be mowed at a maximum of twice per year. 10, approval of final stormwater pollution prevention plan subject to approval by the Planning Board's consulting engineer and Town of Hyde Park stormwater management officer. 11, issuance of stormwater permit by the zoning administrator. 12, proof of recordation with the Dutchess County Clerk of a stormwater easement and maintenance agreement approved in form and substance by the Planning Board's attorney and town attorney. Be it further resolved that before the zoning administrator may authorize issuance of a solar system building permit pursuant to Section 130-4A of the Town Code for the project, the following conditions shall be satisfied. 1, approval by the Town Board of a removal bond pursuant to Town Code Section 130-8L4, or alternately execution by the Town Board of a decommissioning agreement with the applicant for the project. Such removal bond or decommissioning agreement is to be based on disassembly, disposal, and site restoration costs, only excluding salvage value. The approved and executed decommissioning agreement shall be recorded with the Dutchess County Clerk. 2, entry into a payment in lieu of taxes pilot agreement with the Town of Hyde Park pursuant to Chapter 100 of the Town Code and recordation with the Dutchess County Clerk and proof of filing with the Town Assessor and Town Clerk. Be it further resolved that prior to the zoning administrator may authorize a certificate of completion for the project, the applicant shall hold a training session for members of the Roosevelt Fire Department.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Good job.
I can't breathe.
That was a great job going through a really long resolution. Congratulations, Ms. Dana, for getting your first project through.
That's right.
The next item on the agenda is titled Cream Street Solar Farm. It's also represented by Ms. Dana, and we're at a similar situation. This site is located on 2 parcels, 129 and 133 Cream Street.
Yeah.
I brought up today, even though I hadn't thought about it before, the possibility that there might need to be a cross-access agreement, but that's been handled in the conditions.
Well, so I spoke to Tad about the need for a cross-access agreement, and here, because it's the access is on one property and the panels are on another property, but should they be sold separately and access becomes an issue, there is enough frontage on the other property to put in an entrance. So we didn't feel that we needed to make an access easement a requirement between the developer and the owner. However, the only difference between the resolution you just read and the one that you're going to consider tonight, you don't have to reread it, is Condition 12 says that the stormwater easement agreement must provide the town with access from Cream Street, and that the decommissioning agreement in one below also has to provide the town with access. So the town will have the ability to always use that access road to access the site regardless.
Thank you. I hope that wasn't too confusing. It's just, this is for Cream Street, not what you did. The issue really was just if the town needed to go in and somehow do the decommissioning, if one lot had been sold, they wouldn't have necessarily the right to enter on one site that's been utilized. So that's why the condition has been added thus. So we get a motion to reopen the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Again, this process has been through numerous reviews, numerous iterations. Just to clarify, we had a neighbor, Mr. Haran, a former town attorney here, who helped us clarify, let's see if I have a battery, yes, that the lines that will take, the transmission lines that will take power to the actual Cream Street will be on poles. I believe there's 4. Oh, there you are, thank you. I think there's 4, and they're threaded into the trees, so they won't really be noticeable. But all the line in through here has been buried, and there was additional landscaping added, et cetera. So we're now screened everywhere. There's also natural vegetative screening all around here. The parcel that sits over here is very big and could be subdivided at some time in the future. But at that point, we could worry, this is all trees in through here too, we could worry about screening at that point. But these are right now, the houses are really far away, so we're all pretty safe. Additional comments, Ms. Axelson?
Same thing, we did June 3rd comments, and they're all conditions of approval, so.
Thank you.
And just on both of these, I think the collaboration between the board and the applicant and consultants was really positive, so.
I feel the same way, and I sense we're becoming greener and greener here in Hyde Park now. Mr. Lerner, any other comments?
No, nothing new to add.
Thank you. Ms. Polidoro?
Nothing else to add.
Ms. Weiser?
I have nothing to add.
Mr. Pickett?
No comment.
Ms. Wazzer?
No comment.
Ms. Dexter?
I just think it's great that we're looking at our 3rd solar farm in Hyde Park. Thank you.
Fourth.
Third approved.
Fourth. Enclave.
Oh, 4th approved.
Right. So, Mr. Oliver,
No comment.
would anyone from the public like to speak about this application? There being none, may I get a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Pickett, I believe you have this also linked the resolution.
So
They've got this
You
one.
don't have to read the whole resolution since we just read it, and the conditions are identical except for those 2 spots that I pointed out, and you've all seen in your own copy.
So we can stipulate that it's been read into the record?
You can stipulate it's been read into the record, and you can just make a motion to adopt the resolution granting conditional site plan and special use permit approval for Cream Street Solar Farm.
So stipulated, make it a motion to adopt this resolution.
Wow, so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Cha-ching.
How come you got off and Ms. Weiser did not?
Yep, that was easy.
Who seconded that one?
Sorry, yeah.
I did. I think I did. No, I moved it.
It happened so fast,
Oh,
I don't
did.
remember.
You moved it, then I said.
I mean, I think Chris and I.
You
both
seconded it?
Stephanie and Ann.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and we'll wait to hear back from you regarding ATHANAS, what we call ATHANAS West. But again, congratulations. This ends public hearing. We are now in workshop. The first item on the agenda is SLIFSTEIN Accessory Apartment. And could you state your name for the record?
I'm Charles Brown, the engineer for the applicant.
I'm sorry, as soon as you sit down, you can speak into the microphone. We're televised, and nothing picks up without speaking to the microphone first.
Understood.
Thank you.
I'm Charles Brown, the engineer for the applicant. This is an existing pool house that was constructed years ago, and my client wants to convert it to an accessory apartment. The main house has 3 bedrooms. The pool house will be 1. It is attached to the main house. It's my understanding in your code that means a site plan is not required for this?
No, site plan and special use permit are required for an accessory apartment,
Okay.
but they're simultaneous.
Even if it's attached to the house?
Well, that's a good question. We had that go around before. Accessory
I mean,
apartments,
By being here, I hadn't had advance notice of this question, but Ms. Moss has already made the determination that it does require a site plan and special use permit.
Okay.
The applicant had the option.
microphone?
The applicant was given the option, and since the paperwork was already in, to keep it clean and to never have a question about it, he opted to do both.
Understood.
Which is typical for an
Understood.
accessory apartment.
So the answer to that would be sometimes it's required. I'm just teasing. In this case, because it's already existing, it was approved as a pool house, not an accessory apartment, and the kitchen already exists. So Ms. Moss and your client decided it was just a cleaner, easier way to approach this, to keep it as both.
Okay, thank you. The septic system has a 1,250-gallon tank, which is adequate for the 4 bedrooms. However, we do have to add 1 lateral. We've discussed this with the health department. They're not requiring any additional soil testing. We have that plan ready to submit now. I mean, it'll go into the health department tomorrow. So I anticipate by, I guess we need a public hearing on this?
We have to set a public hearing, and we're also prepared to take action on this tonight,
Okay.
to type and circulate the action.
Okay.
Right, the Department of Health can't approve it until the planning board issues a negative declaration, so we have to start that process.
Understood. Thank you.
And in addition, have you been working with Department of Health here lately?
County Health?
That was a ... question mark, meaning they're not moving very quickly. I'm just giving you a heads up.
It's a 1-month turnaround on a submission.
It is a 1-month turnaround from them?
Then it's a 1 month again when you resubmit, and then another month.
It's been taking, we try to work with the applicants a lot, and it's been taking them a while to get through Department of Health, including if we make those conditions, it's been taking, Department of Public Works and Department of Health are the 2 that are kind of the longest right now. They're just overworked, I guess. A lot going on in the county, which is good, but it's also bad in terms of you want to get something done fairly quickly. Yes. DEC also has some lags, but they've actually been working.
They've caught up recently.
Yeah, they've caught up for us. They've been catching up. And we're one of the towns that has a lot of endangered, threatened, and rare species, so it's been nice to have them giving us a quick turnaround and quick response. So, at any rate, I don't see an issue with this, but let me just go to the consultants quickly. Ms. Axelson, any comments? I didn't think so. Mr. Learn?
No, our primary concern was the additional bedroom and the need to go back to the health department.
Correct. Ms. Polidoro, any comments?
No.
Board members? Anyone? Any questions?
I have it.
So this happens routinely where we have things that were done that need permission rather than, or that rather need forgiveness rather than permission. But this has been there a while. There's no impact to the neighborhood. I know this house actually quite well. I have friends who live on the street. So as I said, I don't see any issues with this. Who has this resolution? Yay.
Nice short one. Resolution classifying the action and determining to conduct a coordinated secret review. June 5th, 2019, Resolution 2019-16. Whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the planning board hereby classifies the project as an unlisted action under SECRA, and 2, declares its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated secret review of the project, and directs its secretary to send notice of its intent to all involved and interested agencies.
Is there a
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. The only involved and interested agency is the Department of Behavioral and Community Health. We had suggested setting the public hearing for July 17th to give them time to respond to us. Does that seem okay to you?
Yes.
Thank you. Given the date, our next meeting is, or our first meeting in July is July 3rd, and that they have 3 days by law to respond. They don't have to respond before then, so it seemed more prudent to set it for July 17th. And also, it'll save your applicant money because there's a charge just sitting here for these. So making a motion to set the public hearing for July 17th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry we were so quick. I hope that was okay for you. Thank you.
No, make it longer.
Well, I had assumed with the length of our agenda that we might not be getting out till late, but we're doing this pretty
Don't say
expeditiously.
anything.
Uh-oh.
Don't
Say that.
Uh-oh.
Don't say
No
that.
jinxing.
Starting off then.
Yeah, right.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Dollar General. This one won't be going so quickly, but it still will be greeted as nicely. Sorry, pardon me?
This is
Applicants are
Dollar
seeking
General.
approval for site plan to locate or erect a brand-new building, stick-built, at 1 East Dorsey. This is the intersection of East Dorsey and 9G. The applicants have responded positively to several suggestions by the board and our consultants as to architecture, site layout. I can go on, but I believe we're ready to circulate tonight. And I also want to just state, for the record, Ms. Mojanowski, that I've read lots of traffic impact studies and traffic impact assessments, a lot more than I thought I'd ever want to. Yours was actually one of your consultant prepared one of the best ones I've seen before in terms of a layman reading it as easily as he could, or she could. The first time I read one, I believe, was for St. Andrews.
Yes.
It was this thick, and we had synchro analyses, and it went right over my head. I realized in reading yours that there still could have been an executive summary that would have more or less said, here's the conclusions, here's what we based on, here's some of the traffic that was going to be out there anyway. It's not, direct traffic, just,
Right.
it was a pleasure reading it, and I don't say that very often about traffic
Good to
studies.
hear.
Let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. Again, for the record, I'm Karen Mojanowski from Bowler Engineering, and I'm here with Ken Fioretti from HSC Hyde Park LLC this evening, who is the developer and future owner of this property here located at 1 East Dorsey Lane in the neighborhood business district of the town. And since the last meeting, we were asked to take a look at adding a right-in only off of Violet Avenue, which is State Route 9G. So we have made that change to the site plan, as you can see here. And that was really the major point from a layout perspective in order to keep this moving forward. So we went ahead and did that. And then we readjusted this drive here, which is for the delivery truck to pull forward and back into the delivery area, angled away from Route 9G as requested. And we have submitted this layout to both New York State DOT and the county DPW as well. We also, since the last meeting, added a lot of landscaping to the plan as requested, including this foundation planting area out front and more street trees and shrubs along the entrance that's there. We're also providing about 900 feet of sidewalks around our entire property with connections to the store, and we also added another bench there as requested. We also went back to the drawing board with the architecture. There was some great feedback that was very helpful at the last meeting we attended. So what you see here is the new version of the architecture compared to what we had last time we were here below. So we went ahead and added those dormer windows up top to all 4 sides. We also removed the barn doors and added more of a garage door look. That's here. Also to the vestibule area, which is a little hard to see on this, but it's on the elevations. We also added these craftsman-style columns to the front, as well as a pergola over the entrance. And then, as you could see in the all 4 perspective views we provided of the elevations, we added those windows up higher to break up the facade, the very high and linear windows, and provided all the materials and the color scheme for the building. So hopefully we're ready to start seeker and continue to move forward here this evening.
We're prepared to do so. Again, I want to thank you. I should add that in the traffic impact assessment, it basically concluded this is a fairly low traffic generator. I don't remember the exact numbers now, but there was probably a quarter of the traffic that's there was already on the road anyway. We'll just divert over. The rest are going to be unique visitors to the site. but the conclusion was that the mitigation that would have been proposed, or that would have been suggested, would be to add additional lanes, and in both cases, neither on Dorsey nor in 9G is one warranted. We also have our consultant's own traffic engineer just taking a look at it to make sure they'll verify for peer purposes with the conclusions. Since none of us are traffic engineers, that'll sew that up nicely and neatly. And I want to thank you personally for, and I'll say Ms. Weiser, because she's the one who kind of really drilled down on the architecture, and it's nice to see that these weren't huge changes, but they're big impact changes. At least to me they are. I think you'll hear the same from my colleagues. Yeah. So let me start with Ms. Axelson, comments?
Yes, and I'm going to just say I appreciate the board's patience. I'm just handing you my review letter dated June 5th, 2019. I brought copies. I'll email it tomorrow. However, we collaborated with, it was Pete and Megan and I, and also Rich Andreasen, to go over stormwater. So you have a very comprehensive review here. Pete has identified, and I agree with this, the major engineering concern is site drainage and traffic. I have a number of comments that mainly pertain to technicalities in zoning, but relate to impervious area. For example, normally what we see on site plans in Hyde Park is, for example, with parking and the travel aisle, it's a total 60-foot width with 18-foot long spaces on either side of a 24-foot travel aisle. And when I got looking at the zoning table, I realized that bringing that more into compliance with the standards that Hyde Park is used to will also help with your impervious area in regards to drainage. And also, there's a standard for total maximum impervious area of parking stalls and aisles at 350 square feet per space. And the required amount that's allowed would be 9,450. And on the zoning table, it looks like you have a higher number and would need a variance. So what we're hoping is that if we can kind of bring that all into compliance, it'll help with drainage, help with how much of a variance you need, if at all. And I have been in communication with the traffic engineer, Jennifer Mishnowitz from CPL, and she's given me some draft comments in an email, but I didn't want to rush that. You know, she hasn't done that many reports for the board. So I'm hoping to speak to her at the end of this week, and we'll see if we can get a review out. I know that she said she didn't do an in-depth review, but that she generally sees the validity of the conclusions, and so I'll speak with her and get the get a review memo out to
I
the
better
planning
breathe a
board.
sigh of relief after I gushed over it to know that our consulting engineer, no, I'm just teasing. I looked at the overall analysis and then drilled down a bit, but I was waiting for someone with more expertise to drill down further. I believe what you're referring to would be to neck this down a bit, the driving aisle, therefore move this back to the west so that there's less impervious.
Yeah, everything will kind of scooch over, I guess, toward the building.
And since you'll need a variance from the ZBA as to scale, and they're required to give the minimum that they have to, that might help with their decision. I'm just bringing that up. But overall, I think that's not a minor detail to get it down, but if it helps with the drainage, I know that's been Pete's concern ever since we started, his
Yes.
drainage. His basic concern is making sure that we don't have off-site drainage. It may be there now, but if we're going to increase the runoff, which we can't really do, but we still shouldn't be trying to approve a plan that will at some point cause water to go off-site. And we have a letter from the neighbors basically saying that they were okay, ready and on board with this development. They're pro-development for the town, but they're concerned to make sure that we don't put stormwater back on their properties. So we'll be making sure we don't do that.
And it was the difference between just regular sheet flow,
And
Natural
making it
flow
point
drainage
source,
and-
making a source point.
channeling.
Yep.
Other concerns, and I kind of went back through all my notes. The board had expressed concern about 24-hour operation, or what the proposed hours of operation would be. And so I think it would be good to at least have a narrative response about what are the hours that are intended and how that would be handled, and then, and/or plan notation to memorialize that, so that could be enforced. Other than that, I have some other lighting comments, and Pete and Rich Andreasen have a number of stormwater pollution prevention plan comments. So there's plenty to do, but I think we've made a lot of progress.
At the very first meeting on March 6th, I brought up that when we have the delivery, or when we have 24/7 operating, we typically add a note to restrict hours of delivery, just so that neighbors don't hear the percussive sounds of the backing up of a truck, beep, 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 like that at
Yeah.
4 in the morning. That I think we need to keep track of, but that's a pretty granular element right now. But let's keep track of it. And I believe that Ms. Majanowski also said that they put in 24-hour operation just to sort of plan for the worst or the best, if they're that busy. Maybe I should put it that way. But that might not be the actual hours of operation at this point.
Right. And then, other than that, we had a few more, landscaping comments that we'd like to have resolved, like some more screening on the southwestern and western sides of the truck turnaround. And also, there are these sort of long
Monocultures.
lines of spirea plantings. We'd like to see that, a little more variety in those plantings. And because I believe one line of those is supposed to serve as sort of a buffer to the adjoining neighbor, and that's a pretty low-growing plant, so.
Particularly that variety. Thank you.
Those are my biggies.
Mr. Lerner?
Well, I think Liz hit on most everything, but I guess I'll go into a little more detail on the drainage concerns that we have. As part of the stormwater design requirements, you have to do soil tests, and the soil tests that were performed for the basin that's proposed indicates that the top 2 to 3 feet are fill, and according to the design requirements, you're not allowed to put an infiltration practice in fill. So we have to figure out how to accommodate the proposed practice, along with meeting the separation requirements to existing groundwater. So that's another reason for the proposal to reduce the amount of impervious that would reduce the size of the required size of your practice. Another possibility is possibly porous pavement in the parking spaces, something else to consider that would help. And then, I think, as we mentioned also before, is the spillway for the basin is directed at the property line, and that's something that we need to try to avoid if at all possible.
Did I hear you say pervious pavement?
Yes.
So I believe we've only had a couple of
At
pervious
least
pavements
one.
proposed. That was Mr. Baxter's medical office that's never been built, but just so the board's aware and the applicants.
These pavers.
Can you say that louder?
Dunkin' Donuts, I think, in the drive-through.
Yes, they do, that's right. So pervious does require some periodic maintenance, but it's something to consider, because if stormwater is going to be one of those that could drive this not to happen, then we want to make sure that we solve that in advance. But again, there's maintenance by the site owner once it's there. You have to get particles out, et cetera, salt, that kind of thing. It's a good comment, thank you. Ms. Polidoro, comments?
No new legal comments, except that if we do go the route of pervious pavement, I think we should enter into some kind of maintenance agreement, just because we want to
The town may
ensure
need
that
to.
the maintenance is going to happen.
It's a good point. Thank you.
Also, the board, Liz suggested one garbage, and the board should consider whether additional receptacles should be placed throughout the parking lot.
I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry.
I recently visited the other Dollar General, and I'm questioning whether one garbage is sufficient.
Is enough?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
One dumpster.
No.
Garbage, garbage can,
For
trash
customers,
receptacle.
yes.
Maybe a garbage and recycling? I don't know.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver, comments?
Thank you very much for making the changes that you did. I think the architecture looks great, and I really would like to see the idea of impervious or pervious pavers to reduce the impervious. I think that'd be a great step in the right direction to reduce the runoff that is going to be an issue here. Other than that, I agree with the change of the spirea. I'd like to see something better for screening. Again, that's pretty low. And other than that, thank you for continuing to work on your project here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Ms. Dexter?
I echo my colleagues' comments about the improved architecture. It's amazing. It's very subtle, but big impact. Thank you, Ms. Weiser. So my concerns with this continue to be with the traffic. And so I guess when we do the traffic study analysis, does it take into account the fact that there is a church across the street that has very, very intense periods of traffic twice a day, Monday through Friday, or at least twice a day, Monday through Friday, and at least 2 or 3 times on the weekends that appear to come in direct conflict with this entrance exit. Because
Well,
I know a lot of times the traffic studies taken, they're kind of like generic, but this is very specific.
One of the emailed comments that Jennifer Mishnowitz made said the TIA only included weekday analyses, no Saturday or Sunday. But the other thing is, I'm asking for the driveways on the east side of East Dorsey Lane to be shown so we can start to look at the potential conflicts with traffic coming and going. So I guess it would be helpful to know if there's a way when you put those driveways on to show which is related to the church and then the school also. So there's church and school.
It's church and school.
It's a
Yes.
church school.
And school could have activities on the weekends as well. I think
No,
that
that's
would-
exactly what I'm talking about. It's the
Okay.
school buses between 8 and 8:30 in the morning,
Right.
directly coincide with rush hour.
Right.
And I just wanted to ask you also on your comments, you asked them to show the driveways on the east side of East Dorsey Lane. Do you mean north or south?
It would be south side of East Dorsey.
It would have to be north or south.
It's the south side.
Okay.
This is, so,
Because it runs.
Wait, hang on.
east-west, and this is the north side, so you want the south side shown. It's about over here somewhere.
Sorry, I looked.
Nope. North is this way.
Right. Well, anyway.
That's this,
Yeah.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, just.
Let's show this.
Because that is having, now driving that route every morning, it's pretty intense. The traffic is very intense. And then it's fine again. You know, I mean, as soon as all the buses and people aren't dropping things off, but it's really intense for that half hour.
I can answer some of that question because I read through actually almost all of it, of the traffic impact assessment. So their consultant used both general DOT counts that were, I believe, 2 years old, and they did specific traffic counts for the site. They actually stood outside and counted everything. And they did it morning and after, peak for morning and afternoon, and they did a quick look at what the noon traffic was around there. So all their counts would include all of the school and, well, I shouldn't say church, the school traffic only, because they didn't do a Saturday and Sunday. So it wouldn't look at what the church impacts are necessarily, but it does look at school. That's
Right.
included in
And
it.
I would just also remind you that they not only do that, but they have nighttime events there also.
As well as voting.
Exactly. It just, when it fills up, it's a busy
So
site.
weekends could be, yes.
Okay. I'm trying not to berate the point, but just want to make it perfectly clear.
No, that's good. Very helpful.
Anything else?
Nope.
Thank you. Ms. Wasser?
I agree with the comments already presented by my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pickett?
Want to thank you for taking our previous inputs into account. The architecture, I think, looks very good. Also, the sidewalks, that's about 3 football field lengths worth of sidewalk in there. Want to thank you for including that, because
Yes, you would know.
going around that end corner there could be a toughie. The only thing looking at is the screening for the neighbors, as far as my point of view, to make sure that we get the height, and whatever you put there is also sound deadening too, so look forward to that.
Thank you. Ms. Weiser?
I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your serious consideration of my notes regarding the architectural cohesiveness of the building. It's really starting to feel much more craftsmanlike. I just have a few more suggestions that I think will help bring it a little bit more together. Regarding the rear elevation, in order to break up the expanse of the wall that's here, I thought maybe you could add 2 more sets of the faux windows on either side of the barred doors, just to break up that expense, especially since that's what's going to be facing, that'll be facing the street. Same thing with the right side elevation. If, again, to break up this expanse, the more sets of the strips of faux windows here and here. And then, again, with the left side elevation, you'll see it sort of wanting to just break up the expanse on either sides of the window. So I would love to see something break up this expanse on the front elevation, but I am at a loss at what to say that could be, because the, I think there, if you were to put something there, you'd lose the symmetry, so it may be a problem that can't be solved. So I'd love to see something there, but I don't know what would work with the symmetry of that.
And what that doesn't show is the landscaping.
Okay.
So we added
Oh, that
that in that
okay.
planting area right along that facade.
Great. So I love the expanded dormers and the pergola with the dentils underneath. I think that's really, really lovely. The only thing, the tapered columns I think look great. Here, where are we? There. But I suggest you make them actual columns and detach them from the sides of the buildings. So you can see that they're connected to the building.
That's
so
going to be my
detach
comment
them.
as well. Remove this section right here if you
And
can.
have them actual
So that they're actual
columns.
columns, this little connection area.
Because by keeping them attached, you create a corner that at night could be dark and a very dangerous spot.
I'll
So,
check
like,
with the
right
architect.
in here, it could be dark and dangerous with that, when it's not connected. You should be able to see right through that.
Okay, we'll check on that.
That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Those are great comments, colleagues, particularly the one on traffic, to make sure that we have a thorough analysis of what potential impacts are throughout the week, since this is operated 7 days a week and 24 hours. Otherwise, I think you've heard positive comments. Let me echo those. It's really nice to work with applicants who are so forthcoming. Obviously, you want this here in our town, because the sidewalk alone was a big give, I know. But it's also something that this particular neighborhood really needs, because it's got a neighborhood all behind it. We want to, you're suddenly having a four corners here that's going to have sidewalks ultimately everywhere. It'll be really activating this, it's not an entrance into town, but it's one of the first commercial intersections you get into after traveling through a mix of commerce and residential. You're not going to have nothing but commerce here ultimately, I'm going to suspect, because we happen to know that a parcel that's right over here is on the market, along with maybe a potential parcel there. This one's commercial, this one's not, but it can be commercial. So if someone wanted to pick those up, you suddenly have a nice four-corner intersection, which we don't have a lot of in our town.
Yeah.
Our prior code required that the planning board not create four-corner intersections. That's why when you drive up and down 9, all the roads are offset.
Yeah.
I'm told by a historian that that's so that people back then believed that that would keep Hyde Park not a city and more rural. I think it just was poor planning myself, but because we're living with the results today. At any rate, my only comment really is on the architecture is to possibly see about making those into true columns rather than what the effect of a look of a column is. I think that'll really get it down. I agree with what you heard also from Ann about adding more faux windows, but that's not going to make it or break it for me. I also agree that having a monoculture of just spirea at the end of the parking lot or the edge of the parking area here isn't really suitable for screening, and it's also, spirea can have problems if there's a heavy winter with breaking of the limbs, et cetera. There's got to be something sturdier and maybe easier to maintain. I'm thinking maybe forsythia is not easy to maintain unless you're going to let it go natural, but we can work up some suggestions as well.
Well, they
Yeah,
recommend something.
I was going to say the inkberry has been losing leaves at the bottom, keeping them at the top. So I'll talk, Ms. Moss, as you know, is a landscape architect by training.
She
I'll
put
talk to
something
her
in
as
here.
well. She did.
Honey locusts and lemon planes.
Those are London plane trees. Those are for the tree suggestions.
Oh, you meant London planes?
London planes is what it's supposed to be.
It says lemon.
It should be London planes. That's the common name. That's the more technical
did
name
I
for a
spell it
sycamore.
wrong?
It's a company called Sycamore.
What?
I want to say I approve of this. I shouldn't say approve. I like the right turn in. This was suggested by DOT itself. And again, the reason why is you don't want all the traffic that might be coming down to this location that's traveling toward the north. You don't want all of them having to come in here and then take a quick left. It's much better for those individuals to come in and then exit out and continue on their way. So to me, you're probably going to see more traffic generated in the evening when people will be driving home and can stop in and pick up whatever they need to pick up. As it's turned out, our attorney tells me that she's been stopping at the current one on her way to work sometimes to pick up things or on her way back home. But it's convenient on her way. So I think that this will actually pick up some of the traffic that you're hitting there right now. And having read the traffic report, this road has a lot of traffic. A lot. It seems to have generated from people coming off Cream Street and the Slough Point
It's a
Turnpike.
feeder. It's a feeder
They
from.
go to East Dorsey and then curve around. I had no idea the traffic counts were that high on that road.
Yeah,
So
it's a feeder.
I now understand more, I think, why you chose this location, because you have a whole neighborhood that kind of exists over to the east of that site. where there's no store, no drugstore, nothing. So because at first I have to admit,
West also.
and West. We were all kind of going, why would you put one so close to one where it exists? But I can see now that there's a market that you can capture that's probably not being captured because people are resistant to driving further north if they can go close. And for people making a decision point coming from the east, they could just as easily say, I'll go left and head down into Poughkeepsie. So if we can service the market better here in town for our residents, I'm all for it. At any rate, that's all my comments at the time being. Who has this resolution?
I think I do. I do. Resolution classifying the action and referring the application to Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, Dollar General, June 5th, 2019, resolution number 2019-04. Whereas, now therefore be resolved that the planning board hereby 1, classifies the project as an unlisted action under seeker, 2, declares its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated seeker review of the project, and directs its secretary to send notice of its intent to all involved and interested agencies. 3, directs its secretary to refer the site plan to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to Section 239M of the General Municipal Law.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. The involved and interested agencies, just for the record, are New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, the Department of Transportation, the Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health, the Dutchess County Department of Public Works, Town of Hyde Park Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of Hyde Park Fire Inspector, and the Fairview Fire District. It doesn't say on my agenda about setting a public hearing, but shouldn't we consider? Cynthia shakes her head.
It's up to the board if you are ready to set it for maybe July 17th.
I was going to say, shouldn't we set this also for, I know it'll be a long evening per
Oh,
se.
Right,
Whoop.
Cynthia just reminded me. We're working towards a neg deck because they have to go to the zoning board for those variances.
Oh,
So we should wait to set the public
So you can open a
hearing
hearing, but it would have to be continued until
until after the zoning board of appeals. Did that follow for you?
So,
If we set the public hearing and open it, then we'll have to adjourn it to some date while you work with the ZBA.
but we can still do the neg deck
The neg
before
deck
the
would be-
public hearing? Okay. That was my main question. So-
I saw a happy face suddenly back again after the panic face. So yes, we have a protocol with the ZBA so that if there's an interconnected review, we do seeker prior to them taking action. It's only when there's an uncoordinated review and it's just them involved that they do seeker.
Sure.
We have a little bit more experience. We have a lot more experience with it than what they do. So
But we couldn't do seeker until the 17th based on the 30-day
Right.
turnaround.
So we'll wait to set a public hearing, but we'll placehold you for the 17th to consider doing a neg deck.
Perfect.
And we'll have comments on traffic well before then, I hope. Nodding,
July.
yes, thank you. Because if traffic is going to rise to the level of seeker, I think we should know that in advance. Just based on the summary, I can't really see that happening again, but at the same time, if I'm looking back at my notes from the last meeting, every board member did discuss concerns about traffic strictly because of the volume that's generated during school pickup and drop-off, both with buses and with parents coming forth to drop off their children, and the variety of other activities that go on there, evenings, et cetera. So, at any rate, could you give me your last name again?
Fioretti, F as in Frank, I-O-R-E-T-T-I. First name's Ken.
Are you the developer of the site, or do you develop sites on behalf for Dollar General?
I'm part of Hicks Snedeker Company. HSC is the applicant. We are the developer. We buy the land, we get all the entitlements, we put up the building. We are not Dollar
bring
General.
this a little bit closer?
We are not Dollar General.
Okay, so you're leasing to them. You're entering into a
Correct.
lease agreement.
We-
Okay,
We buy the
thanks.
land, we lease it to them. They're responsible for 100% of all operations as far as the operation of the store and everything else.
I apologize. Did I meet you at the initial offline application?
No, we've met about a year and a half ago on a separate project.
That's
but
what it was,
we have
because you looked familiar, but I'm like,
Yes.
okay. And
Correct.
oh, that's right. Now I remember.
Yes.
For the mysteriously unnamed user, I think I know who that was.
Yes.
And yes,
that's
Mr. Fioretti,
mysteriously dissolved.
I didn't remember that you were with this organization because, of course, you lacked the southern accent that the rest of them do from Arkansas down there. That's why. So,
Uh-huh.
good to see you again.
Thank you.
His
It's a
firm
pleasure
that
to
he
see
works
you.
for is actually based in the South, and all the other members, when we first met with the team to discuss this in a pre-app meeting, Mr. Fioretti wasn't attached to it, but I felt right at home because everyone had a Southern accent. So it was nice to hear because I don't hear that much of that from a uniform group of people up here. So we'll see you back on the 17th.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very good to see you again.
Yes.
The next workshop item on the agenda is PLT storage yard reconstruction. The applicants are seeking a site plan amendment as well as a special use permit. The special use permit is for the expansion of a current use. The site plan amendment is to cover all the changes that are being proposed. In advance, the site was pretty much destroyed by a horrific fire. The applicants are seeking permission to rebuild it. In the meantime, they're adding a series of buildings where they and storage areas where they can take all the uses that were formerly in there, move them out so that they can continue while the site is rebuilt. We had an opportunity to do a site walk, site visit with the applicants and Mr. Berger, and I can tell you that I certainly, and I think all my colleagues were really impressed with the volume and scale of the operations there. And this is one of those businesses that every town has one. It's nice that it's already screened as much as it is. I also want to thank Mr. Berger, who really did turn on a dime. I mean, we walked the site, made recommendations, and 2 days later, voila, we have the paperwork. So that's really fast. Thank you. And you took, I didn't even see you taking many notes. You seem to have kept everything in your head because I saw everything got changed and I didn't see you write everything down. So congratulations. Let me turn,
Not yet.
let me turn it over to you.
Good evening, Joseph Berger, Berger Engineering with Patrick Gleason, the owner applicant. Basically, we're going, after the, as mentioned, a fire, we have a 3-phase reconstruction proposed. First phase will be to build the be a permanent building for maintenance for the winter. That phase will also include other site work like the drainage that we need to fix, silt fencing and restoration, some screening, and moving of the oil tanks to the northern line so that they're away from the building. Then there will be the demolition phase, and then there will be the phase of construction of the new building. In order to build the new building in the same footprint as the old, we will be adding in the northerly corner to close it off, just add a little bit additional room. But for the most part, this footprint will remain the same. But we will be needing an area on Mr. Baxter's property, which is shown on the north side of the property, for what would be a use for normal operations. The area currently being used for that, which is in the northeast corner of the property, would be used for staging, demo, and building of the new building. Therefore, we have no more room on the site. We will be gaining a temporary, short-term easement across Mr. Baxter's property. We will lay down an area, and that will be used for storage of equipment and materials for the normal operation of the Gleason Company. Upon completion of that, at the end of phase 3, when the large building is done and completed, that will be removed, scarified and restored to its original condition. Landscaping in the northeast corner replaced so that we have proper screening. At the site walk, we talked about placing 3 different areas of screening for the neighborhood. On the south, we'll be putting up a wood fence on top of the retaining wall because, as we saw out there, the area is not really capable of supporting new trees that were planted before that died. So we felt that a wood fence would provide good screening. On the west, which would be on top of the hill, looking toward down to the retaining wall, we're going to put another large fence. And to protect that fence, we're putting a small block retaining wall in front of it. So basically, we have a block retaining wall to stop anything from hitting the fence, and a fence behind it for the screening purposes. On the north, right north, where we used to have on the 2012 site plan proposed trees, there's no room there, and the area is not capable of supporting. So we're going with the same concept of putting a wood fence on top of the existing retaining wall. That will go pretty much in the entire area from the west all the way over to where the new gas storage will be. Now, in phase 1 and 2, that will be done, but the remaining north line, which will be in the northeast corner, won't be screened until phase 3, because that will be where we move in and out for the Baxter property. But upon completion of the building, restoration of the Baxter site, that area will be planted with plants, trees in that case, not a fence. We're also adding a post and rail fence around all the green area, which would be just north of the building, so that that area will not be disturbed during phase 1 and phase 2, and the grass will remain, the lawns will remain lawns. We're also adding trees in the white pines, I believe, in that triangular area, right in front of the new building, or the existing building, for additional screening.
So, just to interject for a moment, the grade, if you're on South Point Turnpike looking up, you do look up because the grade rises fairly substantially from here to here, so the addition of white pines, even if they lose their lower limbs, they'll still soften the view of the building itself. The post and rail fence was suggested by Ms. Moss to avoid further encroachment to the existing green areas. And I want to just clarify that the fence we'll say the stone base that you're going to add the wood fence to.
Yes.
I don't want to say the term that you used before, even though it was funny, for what you call those blocks. This is internal, it's not actually on the board boundary of the site,
No.
because the fence with the stone base will essentially be taller than what's allowed if it's on the site boundary, but it's internal, so it's allowed.
Yes, it's internal, yes.
And last but not least, the reason why the walls, in order to be screened effectively, or provide effective screening, need to be taller is because you're really high up here looking down. It's
Yes, we
very
are, yeah.
difficult. And over here, you're really low looking up. Over here, it's mostly low, and then you come up to a rise where you're looking kind of evenly at it. This is just a hard site to screen everywhere.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
The topography is
It's rolling,
in this
yeah, we
area.
have all three conditions.
And so the planning board the code requires there to be screening. The planning board is supposed to determine the degree of opacity, meaning how much it was blocked. And in some cases, you just can't block everything. So I'm just
Correct.
going on record as saying that now. But you've done, I think, an admirable job of trying to screen as much as possible. Anything else you want to add, Mr. Berger?
No, I believe that.
Thank you. Ms. Axelson, comments?
Well, first, I want to congratulate Mr. Berger's office, because every time we issue a memo, we get a submittal like the next day. It's like instantaneous. So I've just finished doing this June 4th memo, and what lands on my desk this morning is the submittal that just came in on May 31st. So we'll take a look at that. I'm assuming we have the PDFs somewhere.
Yeah, they were submitted.
So let's see. I know that when Megan and Pete and I went over this, we had concern about that the actual disturbance that's listed is less than 1 acre. We just want you to double check that value to make sure, because I know that Tad was similarly concerned.
Yes.
There was concern about sediment entering the last catch basin on the new system, in the area in question for that previously cleared area.
So we've discussed that with Peter, and we came up with the solution
Right.
to that.
I think we'll need some offline consultation for this next round of review. I think
Yeah.
that would probably help.
I would
At
agree.
this point, because,
I agree.
yeah.
I agree.
And let's see. Some of the stuff you've already discussed. We were concerned about whether the contours on the western edge are existing or proposed.
Well, we showed the proposed because that was what was approved in the site plan.
Right.
And it's slightly different.
Right.
But we wanted to show that proposed, and I didn't know how, because it was approved that way.
Right.
So we can, that
Okay.
was something we probably need to discuss.
Fake
Right.
existing
Right.
conditions.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly.
That's fine.
There's some observation from the site visit about soil stockpiles near the existing stormwater pond and stabilizing that area, which I know has been discussed. Planting white pines at the base of the slope along the sort of northeastern corner of the site, sort of along, like the western side of the site. Again, maybe I'm having direction issues, but on the western side of the site, the sort of northern half, some white pines at the base of the slope, because my understanding is that, yes, in the approved plan, there were some proposed at the top of the slope, but that didn't work. So the board, I believe, had suggested at the base of the slope.
I don't, that in the field, we could talk about that offline, but for the board, I believe that won't work either, because the slope is steep, It goes right down to a rock wall, and there's no place for anything to plant in there.
Yeah,
'Cause
that's an
the-
area that we more or less just kind of wrote off in terms of trying to add landscaping for screening.
Since the agenda meeting?
Well, since when we did our site walk.
Oh, okay.
The areas we were trying, it's this area, this is the pond. It's this area where this is lower, we were trying to screen from. This area rises, the opposite side is the slope. So these people would look up, there's existing vegetation right around here right now that blocks some of their view. And then this dips down again, then it comes back up. It's a tough site, like I said.
Yeah.
To screen fully. I'm sorry, go on.
Well, I'm just wondering if we do an offline meeting, if we should have a couple members of the board that were on the site visit, because
Well, this
some
member of the
these
board is
other-
almost always there, as you know, so I'm sure I can get a couple of my colleagues to join us.
I think that would be a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah, I think so.
Excellent idea.
Thank you.
So rather than me get into any more detail, let's,
I think so, and
Yeah.
we recognize that there are a few items on your review we saw that we
That you've already
didn't
addressed.
take care of yet, and we will,
Yeah.
and we can discuss that at an offline
Yeah.
meeting, yes.
Great, thank you.
we'll set something up.
Mr. Learn?
Well, I think most everything I had to discuss has already been mentioned. I guess I will, the one thing that I don't think has been discussed is that there was a concern about the area adjacent to the pond on the southwest corner that needs to be pulled back and kind of stabilized in that area.
Yeah, we discussed that with Peter, yes.
Okay, so you talked about that with
Yes.
Peter. And then a new one that we kind of noticed just yesterday is that there's an existing drainage line that goes under the proposed addition to the building.
That's going to be abandoned.
And it's
yeah.
going to be
That was
abandoned,
always gonna
right?
be
And we're
abandoned.
assuming that the roof leaders for the new building will be tied into the new drainage system,
correct.
right?
Yes.
Right.
And that's where we're having an issue with
Microphone?
Yeah.
fire, so that's.
Yeah,
Right.
so,
We can't hear him. No, can you
Yeah,
speak
the
in the
point-
microphone
yeah.
for us?
Yeah, from the fire on that one side, a lot of them are clogged up now. And the existing pipe that was in there, we're finding is the old corrugated metal, which at this point, there might not be anything, from 1982 to now, I don't feel it's viable to even try to find them and clean them at this point.
our proposal is to put a new system in, storm showing system, abandon the other, remove it as needed, as the building's being demoed, when the new building's constructed, to tie into the new system.
So all of the roof leaders?
Yes.
So because it looks like there may be some of the existing roof leaders may have tied into that old system. So
They're
all of them,
all
all of
gonna-
them.
In the demo, we'll remove all of that.
Okay.
And we'll move the storm sewer that's gonna be within the footprint, we'll remove. The others will be abandoned in place. And then we'll build, as we build the new storm sewer, the new storm sewer is being built in phase 1. We won't be building in phase 3. At phase 3, we'll connect into those storm sewer at that time. We won't make the roof leaders until that time, because the final location will be based on that design.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay.
And some of it is,
Microphone.
we really don't know exactly how that piping goes.
Mm-hmm.
When we bought the building, we didn't get any prints of how this was done or how that was done. So we're not actually sure exactly how they did it. All we know at one time when we first moved in is that they worked, but we never knew exactly where they went. We didn't get any helpful hints on that one.
The good news is that's why we try to keep really good records now in the town vault, so to speak, because if a future purchaser wants to see how the system works, we're going to have Mr. Berger's plans. It'll be all clear. Even if you don't, when you sell it, if you don't give them the plans, there'll be a copy here they can come and take a look at.
And as the town knows, you require an as-built upon completion, so on each phase of these, we'll be providing that. And upon phase 3, there'll be a final as-built showing all of that for the record.
Perfect, thank you. Any other comments? Andy?
No, that's it for me.
Ms. Polidoro, comments?
Oh, I was just asking Liz about the scale, her comment 12C, and I think we'll just follow up on it. In 2012, the board approved an expansion of scale by 17,000 square feet for 12.55%. And so I was just questioning her number of 203,000 because I didn't think it went that high. But that's something we'll look into.
Well, let me just, we can look into this. I'm looking at the approved 2012 plan.
Yeah, we
And-
can do this on, probably
Yeah.
offline, because Michelle
can.
worked with Tad on these numbers, so there's been some conversation
They've been going back and forth
taking
today.
place already that I'm not familiar, and
Yeah, I just-
Tad's not here.
if we could
So
just
probably be a
figure
great
out,
conversation.
You know, how
'Cause
that number changed. But the one thing, as I'm looking down my comments, had to do with building colors and identifying those. And the reason I'm raising it is it would be good to hear from the board. I'm gonna just make a suggestion that because it's a large building, a lighter color is probably gonna make it stand out more. I don't know what direction you're going in, but a more muted, grayer, neutral, that's just a suggestion. So I'd like to hear what the board thinks about that.
Thank you.
Only other comments that tonight we have a resolution to classify the action, start the secret process, and refer it to county planning.
Thank you. Ms. Weiser, comments?
I have no comments except we look forward to your becoming fully operational once again.
Thank you.
Mr. Pickett?
Thank you very much for the tour, and glad it's progressing. The only question I had was the height of the building. Do you need all that height? I know you bought it as an existing. You need it? Okay.
We know it's going to be under what's required, and we're getting the final, getting some information from the steel manufacturers and what actual size. We still want to pull the wrong one off. We're getting that for you.
Thank you. Ms. Weiser?
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to first thank you for the tour and for putting those white pines in that V section. I think it's a really, simple way to try to break up the mass of that building. I also, I actually don't agree that a lighter building necessarily shows more. I think it would be helpful if you could, for the public hearing, actually bring a sample of the material and the color when the public hearing is set. And last, I just want to say, this kind of the business I really want to see kept in Hyde Park. I'm so impressed with the scope and scale and the innovation, and it's a family business, so I hope we can, we're not going to be the ones to hold you up. We're going to keep moving. But I just want to say I was very impressed, and I hope we can do right by you.
Thank you. Ms. Dexter?
Thank you very much for taking the time that afternoon to show us around. And I want to thank my colleague Stephanie, because you had given us kind of your impressions before we did the sidewalk, which was so helpful when I was walking around. It helped to orient myself. So I just wanted to thank you for that. It's a large site, and it was, I echo, it was just very impressive. I was laughing, just kind of, well, there's the old jail, just looking at the mountains of stuff. But I think we're moving in the right direction here, and I know there's some technical issues that need to be worked out, but you guys are on it. And my only thing about color is I don't think this is a case where I'm going to advocate for barn red.
I
don't think so.
I don't think that was an option, but thank you.
So, as you know, it's kind of one of my favorites. But.
Sorry, that was personally funny to me, sorry.
To be honest with you, is we're construction people. We really don't care too much about colors.
Right.
Well, if I bring you the color chart and you say, listen, we like this one, that's fine.
I believe when Ms. Axelson suggested neutral, she's talking earth tones. And when I'm hoping my colleague to my left, Ms. Wasser, when she said light isn't necessarily bad, she means like beige, light brown.
Yes, not white, but.
Just not white. White would stick out.
Something in the light earth tones, and the sample of the material, the actual material is really the only way we're going to sort of get a chance. And we're not interested in holding you up, but we do need to see it.
Because really, the original color almost, like you said, when you drove by, if you really didn't look that big building.
It's the color of the earth.
You kind of ignored it as you went by. Because I knew people who said, it's right here, and they said, I never saw it before. So.
I have no more comments.
Thank you. Mr. Oliver?
My apologies, I'm not attending the site walk, but I've been up there several times, and I'm familiar with the site. I'm looking forward to getting you guys back on your feet as soon as possible, and anything we can do, hopefully we can. And I agree, a neutral earth tone color on the building, I think it would be nice. And I didn't notice it for the longest time. A few of my friends leased space there, and they're like, "Oh, we're right at Gleason's building," and I'm over at, the supply spot looking for it, and I've driven by it a million times, and up on that hill it is concealed well. So
We've had that comment from a lot of people that they didn't if you weren't familiar with Hyde Park, to know the building was there,
Yep.
you wouldn't know it was there. That was the feeling we got from a lot of people.
It's also the design speed of that road. People travel pretty fast going by. As I said at our first meeting, unless you kind of go wonk and look at it directly on, you go by so quickly. I'll just echo comments made by my colleagues. I think that neutral earth tone colors would be the best. I also want to state what really Stephanie just said, which, and I think I said it the last time, is the board here is to help you get back onto your feet. We don't get to say that very often. Usually it's something that's new that's proposed, et cetera, but in this case, we had the same issue with Joseph's Steakhouse. We made certain that if the business wants to stay open, that's been here in Hyde Park, we're going to help you. End of story. Particularly with the number of employees you have. I believe it's 35 overall generated by this site. Yeah. And that's what I call a healthy business. So again, we're here to help, and otherwise, we have a resolution prepared to type the action and get everything started. Who has this one?
I do. Resolution classifying the action and circulating the application to involved and interested agencies, PLT Storage Yard Reconstruction, Resolution Number 2019-19, whereas. Now therefore be it resolved that the Planning Board hereby, 1, classifies the project as an unlisted action under SECRA, and 2, declares its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated SECRA review, and directs the Secretary to circulate notice of its intent to all involved and interested agencies. 3, directs the Secretary to refer the project to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to Section 239M of the General Municipal Law.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. For the record, the involved and interested agencies are the Department of Environmental Conservation, Department of Transportation, Hyde Park Police, and the Roosevelt Fire District. This is not going to require a variance from the ZBA. This is operating under a special use permit in order to allow the expansion. Is there a reason why we haven't considered setting a public hearing for this one as well? My brain? Oh, sorry, it's on here. Making a motion to set the public hearing for July 17th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll see you back,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
and we'll get this thing started.
Liz,
Good
will
luck.
be in touch on the offline meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
The next item on the agenda is Taconic Realty, Violet Avenue. The applicants are seeking approval for a minor subdivision. They're taking an existing site, I guess what you would call back when a shopping plaza, but more recently it's a collection of kind of diverse uses, medical, insurance, or office, as we would categorize it, storage, and a little bit of educational use. As a reminder, Mr. Oliver is recused from this application. Mr. Waters, one of our alternates, will be sitting in for him through the duration of this site plan. Subdivision and site plan approval. And this is located at 374, 378, 382, and 386 Violet Avenue. Also, just where you first drive into Hyde Park if you're heading north on 9G. Welcome back, Ms. Leibold. Good to see you.
Good evening. Thank you
Over to
very
you
much.
now.
I was a little taken aback by the red, I have to tell
I
you.
know,
was
I
like,
know,
"Whoa."
shocking, I know, shocking.
Yeah. That's a tough act to follow, going behind Joe, too, so I'll see what I can do. Thank you for that introduction. We had previously submitted the site plan and subdivision application for your review. If you recall, the board so graciously attended a meeting with Jason Page, and I think the result of that meeting went quite well. I'm not sure if there were notes or if you were there, Liz, but I think there was a lot of good dialogue. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend.
No, there
with
was,
respect
and
to-
I've already thanked Mr. Page because he was kind of going above him. It's like all of a sudden we got a laser focus for him on landscaping, and he's
He
like,
loves
we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to change this.
Yeah.
It was
That's-
great.
he
It was
loves
so
it.
exciting. We didn't have to, all of us were like, yeah, go.
Yeah, he loves landscaping. So hopefully that's reflected, the result of the meeting is reflected on the plans that you have.
Yep.
I continue to say that I think the most challenging aspect of this project is not really the site plan review, but it's the subdivision and sort of the legal attributes associated with it and trying to figure out scale.
Yes, that was gonna be my big comment was we still haven't assigned scale, and that's because your clients are the owners, it's their decision. But I'm sure there's some negotiation going on as well.
I think that the last meeting was really to get in and kind of have a dialogue with the board and get this thing moving. I feel better about the plan now. I understand the scale, the way that we've in theory allocated it, and I think we're probably ready for an offline meeting with Tad just to go through and make sure that
Great.
she is in agreement with
Great.
what we've assigned. The other part of it, not to diminish the board's role, but is the legal part of it with Victoria and the two attorneys. So I'd love to say that the.
We would like to not be involved in that, I can assure you.
She probably doesn't either. So I'll just give you a summary of what's going on, notwithstanding the site plan components, but with respect to this subdivision. At the last meeting, I did report correctly, although I misspoke, that Dutchess County Water and Wastewater is considering taking over the water distribution and the sewage distribution. So again, this is one of those rare properties in the town of Hyde Park that does have municipal sewer. There is an existing sewer line. Al Natoli had been retained prior to last meeting, and he has been in dialogue with Dutchess County Water and Wastewater. A memorandum of agreement at her request was sent over to her for her review. I think that's, again, the tail's going to wag the dog. I keep saying this, but that's going to kind of take the longer part of the project, not because of the personalities involved, just because it's a little bit more complicated than.
It's very complicated.
Municipal agencies
Yeah.
and, yeah.
Well, there's two attorneys, so there's Lot 1, and there's us, and there's the town, and then there's water and wastewater, so it's kind of complicated getting everyone. But I think we're now organized. She has the memorandum of understanding. We did receive an email from Tanya before she left Water and Wastewater, giving us a list of things that we needed to do to address water, which we did. The package was delivered to Water and Wastewater for their review. With respect to the reciprocal access easements, part of the delay in finalizing those is how Water and Wastewater is going to want to take the water and the sewer. Are they going to want just a blanket easement saying this water line, or are they going to want to meet some bounds for that and the sewer line? So although I feel like we're running really fast, we're running kind of slow with respect to some of those key issues.
It's just on paper it looks really easy, but because there's ownership involved, and this is the first time I've heard of DCWA actually potentially owning the actual water lines up to the buildings. Am I right on that?
It's a little bit different. Yeah, some of them they will, and some of them they won't. So I can share the email with you if you'd like.
No,
I
I find it fascinating that they would be interested in this, put it that way.
I think the reason is because this is an existing site, and the way that Hyde Park Water had originally established it as they had ownership to the meters
Right.
to the building, and that's why. So the Water and Wastewater is being very gracious in their willingness to do this, and we're working with them to make sure that the correct backflow preventers and water meters, and of course, everything will be inspected prior to them taking over the responsibility for those lines. So that's where we are. I tried to address some of Liz's comments. I wasn't sure if some of them may have overlapped the meeting with respect to the parking spaces and the landscaping, so we did add the landscaping per the meeting. It's very challenging for us to reduce some of the parking spaces, and I'm hoping that maybe the board got a better sense of that when you were out there.
I will say that the spaces that didn't seem to be utilized and never or rarely are the ones closest to the existing insurance facility.
Mhm.
But that I've been making a habit of driving by, and actually this whole area is pretty much occupied
It is.
all day long.
Yeah.
And there are times when the existing or the existing hospice parking is completely filled up.
And they're overflowing.
And I'm presuming that because you have cross-access agreements, that if they run out of space, it's like, in other words, if they have a general meeting with all of their staff, that they're going to be utilizing your parking over here and maybe even over here, so.
I think that they're occupying a lot of the middle spaces
Oh,
today. So
currently.
they have expanded, and which is great, and they do have additional staff. And based on our discussions with Mr. Kaminsky, that's some of the resulting additional parking spaces that we're seeing.
At any rate, while I always laud reduction of asphalt and paving, I understand now more when you first stated they need the parking. I thought, no, I see empty spaces in there, but now that I've been going by more often, deliberately looking, I realize that there are times of the day when it's much, as I said, the only parking spaces I see free are the ones that are by the insurance agency, and those are the
Yeah.
farthest away from the other buildings, so those would be the least. And Mr. Spencer, the insurance agent, doesn't have a lot of people coming to him. I think he
Yeah.
goes out, so, but we still need to maintain parking spaces there because there could be a potentially different use there in the
Correct.
future.
And
So-
half of the large building is, just as a reminder, is currently unoccupied.
Yep.
There's an existing lease that, we're moving
You
forward
would
with.
like to have another tenant in there, which means you're going to have more parking too.
Correct.
So, at any rate, I personally bought your argument. How's that sound?
Thank you. I just would hate to take it away and then add it back later at a later date.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add?
I think that's it.
Ms. Axelson, comments?
A lot of comments were addressed. I I know that there was discussion of reducing parking area in our prior comments, but there was some reasoning presented in the response letter having to do with a possible modification of that standard to be considered by the planning board. Then we were sort of revisiting, we could see where landscaping was done in certain areas or identified existing landscaping, et cetera. The one that seems to stand out, I figure it would help to talk about at the latest agenda meeting. It was the one in front of the insurance agency where there's sidewalk, then there's curb, then there are the parking spaces, and there's this big wide thing. And the prior recommendation had said, you know, is it possible to scooch back, you know, from the sidewalk, the curb line, so that you have maybe a strip of planting? Those spaces would be pushed back. And I know they were pushed back to do the sidewalk, but the idea was, is there still some room in there where it could be pushed back a little bit more for some planting there? So that was one kind of lingering landscaping issue.
I call that also safety, because if you're walking,
right,
it's nice to have some green space rather than having cars parked right in at your knees as you're
Right.
walking.
Right. And then the only other lingering one, I think I have a question mark here, having to do with the expanse of parking in front of the Anderson building, but the response basically said that that parking is being used all the time. So I don't know that we want to request any more landscaped area in the middle of that. That
As
one,
I
I
said,
think.
I've been there, I'll defer to the rest of the board as well, but I've been there. Well, for that matter, your office is across the street.
Yes.
I would take it that you guys could give us some sort of informal testimony as well as to how often you see it utilized? You're not paying attention. Like both
Well,
of you.
know, I'm driving in the morning. I mean, I am paying attention, but I'm driving in late morning, honestly. Andy comes in earlier than that.
And he's actually blushing on that one.
I do see parking there. I don't see parking in front of the insurance building quite so much. In the middle of the parking area, I do.
That's what I was saying, because, I mean, it's just anecdotal, but that's how we're allowed to base on, our own experience with the site.
Sure.
And by the way, it's normal. You become routinized to whatever's around. You're just going to your destination and back. You're not supposed to be seeing it constantly as with fresh eyes, so.
Well, plus, the hospice building is expanding, and we don't really know what that's going to do to parking. And my understanding is that both of those buildings have the potential to have meetings convening there, I believe. So the central area, I'd be less concerned about reducing parking. And I'm actually, on the insurance site, it's not about reducing the number of spaces, it's about trying to get a little strip of landscaping there.
Yep.
Let's see. And then I think in order to get answers from TAD, we need some more detail on the scale calculations. And again, there are some parking spaces on the site that already exist as whatever, 10 by 20, 8.5 by 20, various sizes. To have those detailed is helpful, I think. And I don't remember, honestly, her take, but I seem to remember that if there are existing spaces that have been that way, at that size, that the scale calculation could acknowledge those existing larger spaces rather than calculating them at the required parking space size of 9 by 18, which would be.
Square footage is square footage, so whatever the area is, you just use the square footage.
In other words, for calculating the
Put a big rectangle around
Yep,
it.
the existing scale,
Yeah.
it's whatever is all there
I think
that's
that's what we did.
basically impervious. And that's what they did the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
For I can't say the name of the dialysis, Fresenius.
Oh, Fresenius.
Fresenius?
Thank you.
Yeah.
What is it?
Fresenius.
There.
Yep.
At any rate, that's the discussion of the assignation of scale. That doesn't sound right, but that's the correct word.
It doesn't.
In other words, if when we expanded this site, I can't remember what it was, but just theoretically, let's say that the total was 150,000 square feet. It's not that big, but let's just say it is. We granted them, let's just say 12,000 more than whatever that percentage was. They had the percentage left, make it 50%. So they theoretically could say, well, we're going to give all 50% to this one, or this one, or this one, or this one. Or they could say, that would be whatever's left over, 37%. They could say, we'll give all 37%. Or we can break that up, divide by 4, give 9, 9, 9, and 10. It's just up to the owner. That's all.
I guess what I would advise in this situation is that the onus is on the applicant to try to clearly document and take credit for whatever the existing scale is, so we know what we're working with in the
Yeah,
first place,
Yep, I
and what's
think we got
proposed, what
closer.
is pre-existing non-complying and what, you know what I'm saying?
On the table, we tried to do that on this table with more clarity. Maybe just putting boxes on the site and just have a scale plan would be useful.
That might help.
Because it's
but
so confusing.
I think we're very close now. And
Now
we
it's
had-
just the allocation.
Right, well, we had initially thought with all this empty area that could be, and when you have sewer, that could be developed for other housing or something. However, of course, the rise on that is what? 70%? I'm just teasing.
Yeah.
It's pretty steep back there. There's not much room to expand no matter where you go.
Terraces.
Terraces.
It's really difficult rock.
You would
back
need to,
there.
you would need to basically, housing stock prices would need to rise so much that we make it affordable to make a profit to do this. But that is the area that seems most likely for an expansion.
I don't think we would say no and never consider it, but we would allocate the scale to that particular area. But that's the next step, is to just sit with Tad and do that one final allocation.
And as a reminder, if they allocate enough to hospice, it may not need a ZBA variance. It could go through the special use permit by itself. But again, that's up to the applicant and the other, both the applicants will put it that way.
Could I ask you just a quick question
Yeah.
about, on the 9G side, so it's 9G, and then it's obviously their curb, landscaping, sidewalk, and then our site. And you want landscaping in the area between the road and the sidewalk?
Not landscaping, I think we're just talking about grass.
Okay.
Basically,
That's what I think we
it's
had, yep.
necking, so right now, you move this back to allow it, this is the insurance building, to allow a sidewalk, but there's no green space, there's no strip, it would be car going into sidewalk. If you could pull it back another 4 feet.
Looking for a safety strip.
And you do
Safety strip, that's what I was
you just
trying to-
want lawn.
What's it called?
Safety strip?
Safety strip, okay.
Yeah.
Are you saying you just want,
Yeah,
you just want lawn?
People
Well, the
I-
reason that I was
I thought you'd
asking,
wanted something a little, I'm asking.
Well, I'll have the board weigh in when we discuss it
if I could
individually.
just comment on that too, is when we did an application in the town of Poughkeepsie where we had a sidewalk really close to the road, the snow plowing just decimates that area, and
Well,
the salt, so
the-
that's why I was looking to you.
The
is if you
preference
want-
is actually for it to be green strip, then sidewalk, then parking, because you want as far away from the road as
Yes,
possible.
Yep.
And we know from another client of yours here in the middle of town that where the
Yes.
sidewalks are right on 9, that the maintenance of the sidewalks, every time you snow, they're snow's removed, and then they plow, and it has to be
It's a
removed
nightmare.
all over again. So that's up to you. If you want to switch, I mean, the sidewalk, I think, might curve a little bit here and there, but it would be better in terms of a user, as a frequent pedestrian, to be further away from moving cars.
Agree.
Always
Yeah.
desirable, and particularly in this area, because this is another area where, even though there's a lot going on, people tend to go fast.
I just wanted to make sure in that area you didn't want any particular plantings, because I would imagine that they'll just be
I was
decimated
gonna say,
other than grass.
if there are plantings also between a sidewalk and Route 9G, they'll be torn up by the plows.
Yeah, and the other thing I think is that I see a lot of people walking.
Yeah.
Well,
Along
you're in
that
that
area.
neighborhood.
Right, and the thing is, if for some reason you need to get out of the way of somebody, it's a lot easier to walk into a grass strip than it is to walk into
We'll look at that.
bushes and stuff like
We'll look at
that.
that. I think
Just
there's room
in
that we
that
can pull it
particular
down.
area, really, since ALF, or whatever,
Yep.
is it,
Assisted
ALF is
living
in there,
facility.
I see a lot of people walking back and forth. Good, so.
Yeah, we've mentioned before, it's sad when you see some of the residents of the ALF walking right now back and forth along just the existing sidewalk for exercise or something.
But they're out.
But they're outdoors.
And they have a sidewalk.
And they have a
And that's
sidewalk
right.
that this board ensured they had, which is great. So, any other comments, Ms. Eccleston?
Not really, I'll do an update.
Mr. Learn?
I don't have any comments.
Ms. Polidoro, any comments?
Kelly did a good job of explaining the outstanding legal issues. Tonight, we have a resolution prepared to classify, circulate, send to county, and also, if the board is ready, you could accept sketch for the subdivision.
Yeah, I opined earlier in an email that we seem to be, so for the board, for the members of the board who haven't gone through what sketch is not it only exists in our code. Rather, I'm sorry, it exists in other town codes here and there. Some actually have sketch acceptance for site plan, which we don't. But sketch has nothing to do with seeker. It's just a way of us saying that the basic layout of a subdivision seems adequate to move on. It doesn't mean that it's set in stone, the lines can't be moved. But I've been listening to everything that people have said since day one on this application, and almost all the changes proposed have been to site plan, not anything to do with the subdivision line. So as far as I'm concerned, I'll ask the board to weigh in when I call on you each, that we're ready to accept for sketch as well. Again, this isn't anywhere but in our code, but a note that once we accept for sketch, since this is a minor subdivision, minor under our code is below 5, major is 5 and above. We don't have a preliminary acceptance for minor. Once we do accept for sketch, you have to apply for final approval of the minor. And there's some deadline dates, et cetera. But again, the subdivision aspect of this, except for the legal, is really easy, as Kelly has said many a time. It's all the legal access that you have, because you're now creating 4 separate site plans as well. And yes, we have the resolution prepared, and I don't know who got this one, but it's not too long.
I just,
Oh, Rob.
No.
Nope.
You got it?
Yeah, because she has the file. She has the official file, so. Thank you. Any other comments, Victoria?
Excuse me?
Any other comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Let me start to my right. Mr. Waters.
No comment. No comment.
Thank you. Do
There's
you want to make any
very
comment about?
easy, very
Any comment about the sidewalk? Would you like to see grass
well-
between?
There's the pro and the con. With the I think there needs to be green space up there. Whether it's, I mean, I understand the grass and then the sidewalk, and I also understand the cars pulling the nose of a car into the sidewalk. So if there's some way to pull those cars back off of getting up, on that sidewalk somehow, whether it's, one of the strips or something.
Maybe
on
split
it.
the strip, have 1 foot on one side and 3 foot on the other, or something like that.
Yeah, something to alleviate that, because there's plenty of room for the cars to back out in that area. So I think the green space is fine.
Okay.
I was going to say something about the parking on the interior, but after reading your detail of everything, it made perfect sense. I understand it's starving for parking. I even went to the site to see if parking could be put in the back of the building. And it can be, but with blasting. And then you have to build ramps, and there's retaining walls and all kinds of stuff. But it could be done, but it's a big undertaking.
At great expense, and also violating some of what our code says, which is try to respect the natural topography as much as possible.
Right.
And that would be disrespectful in many ways. You really would have to
Yeah.
blast.
Yeah, you have to blast
It's nice
interior.
back there.
Yeah.
It is nice back there, you're right.
Yeah. Yep.
Ms. Dexter?
I would just echo what Mr. Waters said.
Thank you. Ms. Wasser?
I agree with previous comments, but specifically, I would support the green strip and using bollards or some way to keep those cars back off the sidewalk.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pickett?
Agree with my previous people, and we also went through, when we toured the site, and I don't think there's much that can be done in that parking lot for added greenery or anything. It's
No.
just, it didn't look like anything would fit to do it.
Ms. Weiser?
I agree. I like the idea of a 5-foot space between the sidewalk and the parking of greenery.
Thank you.
Oh, and I did have one more.
Sure.
I'm okay with accepting for sketch.
Oh, thank you.
yes.
Okay,
Yes.
except for
Same
sketch.
here.
That stopped me from having to ask. Okay. Believe it or not, since I'm so talkative normally, I have no additional comments. I think we did a nice job with the responses. Some of them are just comment noted, which I know means that there may be a revisiting of it later on. But otherwise, I think we're ready to move forward. Congratulations. I know there's a lot of whirling parts to this for a while, and
So, I was
Go
going
ahead.
to interject, before this can be circulated, this is actually a circulation of both projects of Conic Realty and Hudson Valley Hospice.
that's what I was going to say.
So we will need an adequate number of plan sets for both projects to be dropped off, so that Cynthia can send them out.
Joe's still here, okay.
So, thank you, Mr. Berger. So to remind everyone, because this is an existing site turned into 4 site plans, one will have a new owner, that's Hudson Valley Hospice. The other 3 will retain ownership to the current owners. So we're proceeding in a manner that is being jointly reviewed. So we're reviewing, as part of your application, 3 site plans and a minor subdivision. But because we're doing everything concurrently for seeker, we'll also have the site plan for Hudson Valley Hospice referred as part of this package. And that's basically it. So Ann, you have this resolution?
I do.
Thank you.
Town of Hyde Park Planning Board, resolution classifying the action, circulating the application, accepting sketch, and referring the action to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development, Taconic Realty, and Hospice, and Hudson Valley Hospice. June 5th, 2019, resolution number 2018-29, whereas now therefore be resolved that the planning board hereby, 1, classifies the project as an unlisted action under SECRA, 2, declares its intent to serve as lead agency in a coordinated review of the project, and directs its secretary to circulate notice of its intent to all other involved and interested agencies. 3, classifies the project as a minor subdivision. 4, accepts the sketch plan as adequate for further review by the planning board. 5, directs its secretary to refer the project to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development pursuant to section 239-M of the General Municipal Law.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. For the record, the involved interested agencies are New York State Department of Transportation, Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority, Dutchess County Department of Behavioral and Community Health, Town of Hyde Park Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of Hyde Park Town Board, in case there's a Transportation Corporation, Town of Poughkeepsie Town Board, Town of Poughkeepsie Sewer Department, because that's currently provides the wastewater treatment for the site, and the Fairview Fire District. So a total of 8. So we'll need 8 copies of everything,
Plus
right?
1 for county planning.
Plus county.
Plus 1 for county planning.
Okay, so 9.
And did you get a copy of this resolution,
No,
Kelly?
I'll get it.
Do you want to?
I
Okay.
can get it tomorrow.
You can also have mine if you'd like.
Okay.
I'll just leave it up here for you. So we'll start the circulation, then depending on whether, so the Zoning Board of Appeals is included in case hospice has to go before it?
It's likely hospice has to obtain a variance because they're of the size of the increase of the building. And so they have to go through that process. I don't believe any variances are needed for the
And speaking to
subdivision.
Ms. Moss, these will all become, to the extent that they all exceed the 7,500 square foot scale for the neighborhood business district, they all just become prior non-conforming. So no variance needed whatsoever. So I'm thinking about a public hearing. It seems premature right now until we have a few bits more of information. But it sounds like once we have a meeting with Tad to discuss scale and how you want to sign it, we're pretty much going to be ready to go then.
Okay. I think what I'm going to do is, if we can do a joint meeting, so we have Joe
Yeah.
Hospice with us, and then we'll do hospice at the same time, because the scale has to be allocated for them as well.
You know what happened was hospice, they're eager to move forward because they have some dates, deadlines. So we said, so they came in a little bit before you, but I said, you'll be coming back in, I know, because we can't do anything for them anyway until the subdivision's done. They're just seeking really site plan approval for the expansion of their use, but until there's a lot created, we can't approve the site plan for it.
Yeah.
So, at any rate, whenever you're ready to meet, just let Cynthia know, and she'll contact me, and if we need a couple of board members there, we'll do that too.
I'll come tomorrow and then see if we can set it up to try to do it.
Thank you,
All
and
right,
good to
very
see you.
Thank
Good to have this
very
going. Do you want a copy of this, just for? Because I'll get another copy.
Do you want to keep those, or?
Sure, thank you. I like to keep it in my file. Thank you.
You too. Yeah, sure.
So, Mr. Turner, if you don't mind, could we have a 5-minute break? And could I beg you for one more thing? I believe in are you Mr. Zabo? Are you Mr. Zabo with Phantom Fireworks? Zabo with Phantom Fireworks? We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then I'm going to just real quickly do your site plan waiver, and then we'll go to Mr. Turner. Okay? Everyone ready?
I think it is, yeah. It is, yeah.
You should think.
Okay, with Mr. Turner's forbearance, we're going to skip ahead to Phantom Fireworks. The applicants are seeking approval to do basically a pop-up store. We do these all the time, and we have a recommendation for a waiver of site plan. This will basically be a fireworks stand right near, between the old Coco's and Discount Beverage, the beer store, owned by Mr. Van Valkenburg. Who has this resolution?
I do. Town of Hyde Park Planning Board, Phantom Fireworks, Eastern Region, Gardner Van Valkenburg, site plan waiver. Resolution number 2019-24. Whereas a request for site plan waiver has been made to the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board by Vincent Zabo, Phantom Fireworks Eastern Region LLC on May 10th, 2019, for approvals as required to establish a temporary sales venue for sparkling devices, and whereas, therefore be it resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives site plan requirements for the proposed temporary change as submitted on May 10th, 2019, and on drawings as submitted, and that such request is to be incorporated into the record.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. I'm sorry, Mr. Zabo, you had to stay, so you didn't have to be here, but thank you for coming.
I always like to be for questions, just in case.
No questions. These are temporary pop-up uses, and that's what they're there for. That's why we usually have a site plan waiver request in the first place. But thank you, and good luck with your business.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Turner, thank you so much. I didn't know how long we would be discussing this, so I wanted to get the last person in the audience out. Yeah. So this is Hutchins Statsburg Storage.
Yep.
Many members of the board were here when this was first converted from PDQ manufacturing into storage. There were a lot of, originally it was actually an easy approval. And I want to say I compliment your client for the maintenance that he does of the site. There's never a weed, there's no trash, it looks really good. I've conveyed that to Mr. Hutchins himself. But as originally approved, there were 2 new buildings for storage. The interior was converted for storage. There's office and retail allowed up and through parts of the building. And there was, I believe, an apartment on the 2nd floor.
Correct.
But there were also buildings that were approved for storage in the rear.
Right.
Those were never constructed because of potential costs related to the fact that it's in the adjacent area of a DEC wetland.
Correct, yeah.
So we've had many of us have had several offline meetings with Mr. Turner, including Tad, each time. They're proposing to add buildings along the northern side and to the north of the site. There's an existing structure or existing residence now that will be removed. For the rest, let me turn it over to you, Mr. Turner. Welcome back. Are we on?
It was just on.
Yeah, start speaking. Sometimes
Well, maybe
it
you
kicks
want
on.
to begin? I guess it's not.
It's not.
Hold it.
This says press.
Yep.
I mean, I would think if I see a red light, it should be coming on.
I know sometimes batteries go on it.
No.
Yeah, I think about it probably did.
Do you want to try the attached one just to hold?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've done before.
That's what you're used to.
Gives you a whole little thing to hold on to.
There you go.
It's on.
Aha,
Aha.
we have it.
Oh,
And then it'll go off by the time you get over here.
I have more batteries.
Okay, as Mr. Dupree or Michael explained, the current site plan is as you see it here. We have the original building that used to be PDQ, which is now all turned into climate control storage. This area here, I know we used to call it as a retail space, but is technically office use, and so we redid the parking calculations based upon this as being an office use, and then there is that apartment space which is up on the 2nd floor, which really is unusable, but it's still there. It does exist. And then the 2-story residence here in the garage, the 2 new buildings that were added. And so as it was explained,
The goal right now is to expand the storage facilities that were originally proposed back at the east side of the building. We are going to be tucking one building in against the rear side of the existing building, and then there's 4 buildings here, and then 2 buildings on the north side. The flow of traffic right now is through this main entrance. There's a gate at this location which allows customers to get to the non-climate controlled storage areas that exist here. The intent now is to be able to connect with an access road to the backside here, which will allow access to these units here, as well as you do have the north entrance at this point, which would allow you to come back, and there will be a gate located right about in here. You can see that on the civil drawings. There is going to be an access road that's going to be maintained. It's the current driveway for the two-family, keep saying the two-family residence, two-story residence. That will be out here. The intent, though, is that this is not going to be an active customer gate. There'll be a gate placed there, and it will mainly be used to allow fire trucks and emergency vehicles to get out of the site. Right now, we had it work so that way they could back in and out, in and around in this area to get themselves back out, but we felt that because we have that access point, it's going to be easier just to allow them to flow straight out onto South Cross Road. Because I know Scott would like to be able to maintain and control access to the site, and having it only for these two locations, he finds is going to be the most optimum way of having control of people gaining access to the property rather than using this concealed hidden entrance.
You just said mainly for fire and emergency vehicles.
Correct.
What would be the exception? In other words, you said mainly rather than only?
Well, I should say only.
Okay.
There would be no exception in this case, because all other people, they would be coming in with smaller vehicles, smaller trucks that can access in and come into this area and turn themselves around. We also have, I should say, Mark Rominski, our civil engineer, has met with the DEC in regards to the plan. There were some minor changes that they asked for, and that was mainly in this particular area in regards to the configuration of the retention basins. You'll see that when you look at the civil drawings based upon our plans, the configuration of this basin actually extends all the way into here. And then there are the existing one and this new one in here. I was told that there was no changes, and so when I got the plans the day before we were submitting, I was kind of surprised to see that, and so I didn't have a chance to reconfigure and relocate the snow banking areas as well as what we call the bank parking areas, because we were having some bank parking that was occurring in here. I do have to find a different location for those, and so that way the retention basin can be constructed. Lighting for the site is going to be respectively, it's going to be placed on the buildings themselves. They're going to be low fixtures, wall sconces that shine down, illuminating specifically the areas in and around the entrances, and that's all we are going to be providing in regards to lighting. We're not going to be having any poles or anything, and all these existing fixtures that are currently around the building, those are going to remain in place. For landscaping, you're going to have to look in two areas. I dealt with specifically just general landscaping for the site. What we're doing is we're putting an ornamental fence along the front of the property, bringing it back until you get to where the rock outcropping is. That's going to be remaining back in this area. And so we are providing plantings through here. We are adding 2 new trees on this particular side, and then we're also going up to the other entrance here and providing another ornamental fence along this area and some plantings in here to screen some of the view back into those particular facilities there. To see what the DEC has recommended, they have requested certain plantings to be occurring throughout the retention basins in the back. Those you'll see on the civil drawings. So, as I said, there's going to be 2 different areas.
The landscaping, I'm assuming that it's in the rear, it's going to be something that's native and that belongs, hydrophytic, that will help wick up. Yep.
The retention basins. And the buildings themselves are going to be very similar to what's there now. The only difference is there'll be the one that does face Route 9, just over here, this one here, it's going to be having a gable end on the side that faces Route 9. And that happens to be this facade right here. So you'll have a narrow facade facing Route 9 with the gable on it, and then the rest of the building extends back. There happens to be a modification that has to be made. We did divide this into two separate buildings rather than one big long building. Trekkie has now provided me with a revised elevation check, so I'm hoping to be able to have that for the next submission. So the goals that we have accomplished here, and I know the DEC was very pleased with, is that we were keeping all the buildings outside of that buffer area, where before, when we were going right in this particular area, the building sat like half in the buffer area, and that was something that they were strictly against. And so by pulling the buildings out, we had an easier time in having them review and accept this particular plan. I did want to go over two things. I know that we had, originally the site accommodated 58 parking spaces. With the new calculations, we only require, just want to get this right, total required spaces, we had 58. With the new calculations based upon the office use, we only are requiring 50 spaces. And we will be providing 32 of those spaces, and we're looking to land bank 18.
Can you point out where those spaces are? Because I couldn't find the land bank spaces.
You can find the which?
The proposed land bank spaces? Probably because the lines are very light. We're looking to put spaces over in here. And then because we did have space originally in regards to the proposed rain garden retention basins, we had included a row back in here, and some in here, and some over in here. I do have to go back in it and relocate those because this is now all retention basin, but I do have some space that I can gain up in this area to provide the loss of the additional, or I should say the loss of the ones that would be occurring here.
So by using office rather than retail, or office and retail, it's reduced from 58 required to 50. You're providing 32, so you would need to land bank 18 spaces?
Correct.
So you've accounted for all of the interior square footage now?
Correct, yes.
It was just the change from one use to another?
Correct.
Is it still being leased to that construction company, that front portion?
Correct. The office space is being leased to I don't remember the name of the company.
I see it. Trans something builders.
At one point, I thought you had more than one office space proposed. Is that
Well,
not-
there's this space here, and then there's a vacant space on the other side. I know Scott is looking to move his office into there, but it's not going to be occupying.
But all of the office space is being accounted for?
Yes.
You know,
Might help if you drew boxes or showed us.
yeah, I was going to say the whole building is labeled building/warehouse.
Right.
I know there's an apartment. So
I can
it's.
provide a dividing line.
We just want to make sure you're accounting for all of the space.
Okay.
You want to know what's office versus what's warehouse?
Is there warehouse?
Yes.
Yep.
So
The
I
nature
don't,
of-
I didn't know there was any office. I mean, just looking at the plans, it's been a couple years. No, I didn't know.
The company that built the SPCA is the Trans whatever builders, and they've been there for a while now. There's a very small sign out right in the front of the building So
Okay.
they've been there for a while.
So that would be, even if it's, I'm not, I mean, maybe,
If you look at
Transitional.
PC sheet 102, all the scale calculations are on it, and it lists the different uses and the square footages.
okay.
And then, is,
Up here.
is there an office for the rental business? Like, if I wanted to go there and rent a unit, where would I go?
There is a small office.
Okay.
It's right in here.
So when you say the office use is 2434 square feet, 2,434, that's all the office space?
But there's,
Oh, okay.
but there's
Huh?
additional
It's
office
singular.
space that could be taken over
says
as
office
office,
use.
right? In other words, there's a small portion, but there's more,
The only area we have office space is right in here,
Well,
and that's it.
but
okay.
you just said that there's a second vacant office behind it.
No, there's a space here, and then there's a little vacant office in this side that I know Scott's gonna be moving his office out of, because right now it is technically in the utility closet, and so it really shouldn't be there. And so he's gonna be moving in, and he's gonna occupy the rest of that office area.
Where's the apartment?
The apartment is directly over top of the office space?
Okay, that's the second floor, 1,120?
Yes.
Okay, so that's an apartment.
Well, it would help if these were a little easier to read on the plan outline.
Yeah, I don't think we need a floor layout or anything like that. I don't think that's
I mean,
necessary.
a basic one would be helpful.
Yeah,
not
something
like just
basic,
delineating what's
just
being used for.
acknowledging where it is in the building.
Yeah, because you're pointing
Small
and,
little legend,
But we don't really care
I
where
would
it
say
is, do we?
a building legend that kind of breaks the areas out.
Yeah,
So that
but
we
that's,
can actually
they've
see
got, they have it all
which one it
here.
is, because I know with the original plan, the original submission that we did in phase 2, we did provide that. And so that was
Right, and
the
I just,
original
for some
package.
reason, I thought it was more office space than what you're
We
showing
don't,
now.
it's all here.
But it could just be a different size plan, so.
I know there was transitions
Yeah.
that have gone through in various scenarios, and Scott wanting to be able to possibly rent this.
Yes,
area
that's
as
what I was
office,
remembering.
But that,
and I remembered more warehouse and less office, so.
But he
So that
details
way,
everything. Office.
this entire area is storage. Yes.
Uh-oh.
I thought it did.
It died.
I did.
I did, and I guess that was.
It's where, this is exactly what we're interested in, the use and the area.
He can talk into that mic, I think.
They've already detailed everything.
Even with the microphone.
Should be better now. In the interim, I'll just say for anybody who might be watching,
Right.
the planning board, when we're looking at site plan, we're looking at how something fits into the overall site. Topography, landscaping, lighting, signage, you name it, aesthetic considerations for architecture. We don't normally look at the insides, but because our parking calculations under our code are different based on office versus retail versus other uses, that's why we're just trying to establish that the numbers that you cite are correct, because I thought you'd cited everything in terms of what the square footage, I mean, I know you did, I read it, in terms of what's what. So it's just an attempt to verify that.
I had just recalled an earlier plan where the left side of the building was even, after that indent, was all office, but he says that that plan was not.
Left meaning the northern
changed
side?
before.
Yeah.
It's storage now.
During our original Phase 2, Scott was looking to rent this area out
Right.
as office space because it was closest to the parking, but he ended up by developing the entire thing.
No takers, that's why it's all, but you're right, you have, that your memory is correct. He was looking, and I believe at one point he was even thinking about renting the apartment up above, or having his son stay there, just have someone.
He was
there.
looking for something, but nothing was ever done with the apartment
Right.
space.
In other words, it wasn't for someone just to live as an additional income, it was someone maybe to tie in as a night watchman or something like that, but.
Because right now, his son currently lives in the residence. I'm not sure where he would be, if he's moving out, or what's going to be happening when the...
Well, he'll be moving out unless he
Yeah.
wants to.
The detached residence, not
Yes.
the
Correct.
apartment.
Correct. The one that's over here.
So so can I ask a few questions?
I just had one more thing I needed to bring up.
I want to make sure he finishes his presentation.
The one thing I was going through my calculations again before the meeting, and I did notice that I miscalculated the scale. And the issue was that for the proposed Phase 2 development with additional buildings, I eliminated Building 8, which was an additional 1,000 square feet. And so the proposed scale for the Phase 2 development with additional buildings, not including the land bank parking, brought us to a scale of 58,200. If you looked at taking the bank parking into consideration, it brings us up to 61,116, which puts us over what was originally approved. The scale was 60,202. So we're over by about 914
But you still
square
had,
feet.
you're not over the 50% that was allowed from your base.
No, we're not over the
But They
50%.
still need to apply for special use permit.
I mean, that was what we were
right.
trying to avoid,
But
but
what?
You need a special use permit in order to expand the non-conforming
Aren't we
use.
amending the special use permit?
So they technically have not applied to amend the special use permit, but yes, they need to, yes.
In other words, you have a special use permit now for the original expansion,
correct.
so it'd be an amendment to that special use permit,
So
amending it.
what is the proper procedure for doing that, and what should I be submitting in way of forms?
Special use permit application.
Oh, it's just, we don't have a special, we don't have a separate,
The project is the project, but you
Correct.
just have the additional form and fee that needs.
Okay.
The property owner wanted to avoid it.
Correct. They were hoping to avoid having to go through a special use permit or amending the special use
But
permit.
The board
But
doesn't, they do it in parallel. It doesn't add any more time to the process.
no, it's not the time,
It's
it's the
expense.
additional expense. Because there are significant escrow fees that are attached with it that he
Well,
was,
we can talk about it offline.
let's
Yeah.
talk about this offline.
Because when you're doing the site plan and the special use permit, I don't think.
We
you
usually
should-
combine just the same, we just have the same escrow for site plan.
Yeah.
correct. So I mean, that's something that, we can talk about, so that way Scott is fully aware of what his obligations would be.
I believe
In
it's
regards
just
to
the
doing
fee
that.
for the special use permit, the application itself. But I know you, in an offline email exchange we had, you were thinking maybe not to count the land bank parking, but that's still part of the overall site plan because it's, even though you're proposing something that's, or rather, what we're looking at here are just changes to one use, the actual storage component, but you're still required, based on your parking calculations, to provide 50, so we have to show them banked someplace. And as I pointed out, it is possible to have uses that are already approved, so to speak, more office space. I mean, Mr. Scott converted all of this area to storage, but it doesn't mean that, because in other words, we don't see internal changes on the board, so if he converted this back to office, we've already approved the office use, so at some point he might need to build, in other words, it may not require coming back to the planning board if he does internal conversions and does more for office, because it's still, for us, it's still a use that's commercial. The only thing it would require from us would be, in other words, a sign permit, if it's visible from 9.
Because the way I was envisioning that or viewing that is that if he changed anything inside the building, of course, it's going to end up by changing what the parking calculations are going to be, which would then require him to provide that parking space for that particular use. And we know that that would then impact the whole storage facility that exists here, and then something would have to change in order to accommodate
Yes, potentially.
those required parking
That's-
spaces, because we couldn't bank them. We'd
That's
have to build them.
True, but the purpose of the land bank parking was if this use somehow generated more parking than the 32 spaces, and there was a need for the more parking, but there was no trigger to require it. Having the land bank on the plan gives the zoning administrator the trigger to say, okay, cars are now backing up into this emergency access area, and we need you to build some more spaces.
In addition, I think Mr. Hutchins is particularly scrupulous. We have many site owners who make changes to the interior of buildings that should trigger some kind of change in parking. And you may have seen Mr. SLIFSTEIN earlier here tonight. There was an accessory apartment essentially built next to or attached to a house, and no one knew nothing was triggered, in other words, because people make changes to the interior all the time, and it's not caught by the zoning administrator or the building inspector necessarily because it's all interior and no one sees it. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out the right calculation and make sure that we're prepared for the future.
And use.
Do you think you can fit all 18 into the land area that's left?
I feel I'll be able to, correct,
Okay,
yes.
good. I just want to point out before we go over to the consultants that there is, this was pointed out early on by, I think, Tad, our zoning administrator, there's a lot of rock outcrop here, so this is going to be some stormwater management issues. At the same time, while we're supposed to respect topography, I think we all recognize that we're here, or rather, the use can be accommodated. It will require some re-engineering of the land itself, but this area all around it is highly disturbed along Route 9. So I personally am comfortable, in other words, with removal of some of the rock outcrop that's there, and they're proposing new landscaping to take its place. One more.
I just wanted to point out, this happens to be the grading plan, and one of the things that Scott was trying to do is not impact as much of that rock outcropping that exists here and also in this particular area as possible. And so you can see that, of course, where the buildings are going to be going, those areas will need to be, taken care of, will need to be addressed. But he tried to shove the buildings far enough forward and kind of make them a size that would be able to work and impact that rock outcropping as little as possible. And so he was trying to give that.
I think you and Scott have done a great job on that. It also provides screening, natural screening to the buildings. I mean, there's a lot to it. There's a lot of advantage here, but there is going to be some removal of rock. I just want to make sure the board is aware of that. And some of the rock that's there right now has actually been kind of landscaped. Don't ask me why. I see flowering trees and things are not natural there. It's
When
like,
Milligan's was there.
I think maybe Mr. Milligan might have just popped over and stuck some extra things or something. Anyway, consultants, Liz.
Okay. So yeah, I do appreciate the layout. I see what you're doing, avoiding rock. And I seem to remember in the last one that we might have had some kind of notation, and this is down the road, that basically says something along the lines of blasting is not likely to be necessary, but in the event we do, etc. But most of my questions right now, before I get into a detailed review, have to do with how is the site working, and you've kind of already explained some of that. So your access that's coming in from the south is mainly to get into those office areas, more or less?
The
And some
access.
of the storage?
The access area to the south allows, of course, you to get into this location here, which is the main entrance for getting into the storage facility area. The office use is really entered in from the opposite side.
Okay.
It's through the north side. Also, the south entrance allows clear access to the gate, and right now that is the main gate that allows you to get to the back area, to the two existing buildings.
Where's the gate?
So that's a gate that you have to have a pass
Correct.
to get through.
Oh, that's what the solid line is?
Yes, and then
Correct.
people
The
are
solid
starting
line
unique-
happens to be
unique
the
password.
gate. And so, basically, you actually have a fob, which allows you access to the building. That fob, then also you just pass it over a reader here at the gate, and it allows you then access. The other gate that we're putting in is right at this point, and that's going to control access to this back area here. But once you're back here, you can end up by leaving out through this way if you want, because there is complete circulation behind the building.
And are you going to have signage or something to prevent people from getting out on South Cross?
There is going to be a gate at this location that, of course, a key will be provided to the fire department for allowing them access.
Well, right, but I mean, is there something so that people don't, I mean, if I was there, that would be the natural exit. So
We
if they're
can
gonna-
have them put a
I mean, we
sign,
can
no
put
exit.
signage like no exit, yeah.
So I guess my next question would be, so For folks using the new storage units in the northern part of the site, the intention is that they would come in the northern access, go through the gate on the side of the existing building. Well, actually, they've got some storage units right there. They don't have to go through a gate for those.
Correct.
Anyway, so if they needed to go to the back storage areas, they would go through that gate, but they're not able to access
South Cross
Road. So are we assuming then the turnaround, it looks like next to the building, is that just drive aisle area? And that would be turnaround area? Those aren't parking spaces. So if I'm looking at building, oh, I'm sorry, hang on. If I'm looking at the northernmost building, the sort of shorter one, there's a number on the engineer plan that says 8. Is that mean?
Is
that
that gone?
No, it's
8
still there.
spaces? Parking?
No, that's building 8.
Wasn't added to scale.
So it's building 8, building 4, building 6B?
And then 6A, 5B, 5A, and 7.
So,
So those are not spaces.
no, so those are not spaces, that's drive aisle so people can maneuver in with their trucks or their cars and unload into their storage.
Correct.
But they're not going out South Cross Road, but they should be able to turn around in that because it's not a well-used road.
Correct.
Okay. And so then my next question is, will there be any lighting in that area between those buildings in particular?
In between the buildings, there will be. There'll be
Okay.
the wall-mounted sconces,
If you look at the lighting plan,
the locations of them.
Okay.
And so you'll have lights on this side, there's one light that lights up in here, and there might be 2 in the larger areas, and then the same thing happens down across this face here.
Gotcha. Okay.
But again, those are low-mounted lights,
Yeah.
and they shine directly down.
Right, because the storage buildings aren't that tall, are they? They're like
No.
10, 15 feet, 15
They
feet?
are maybe 10 feet high
Right.
at most.
Right. Okay.
And then also operations of the building, it's between 7 and 7. So at 7 o'clock, the facility is all locked up. You can't gain access to anything. Even with your fob, you can drive up to that gate, wave your fob, the gate will not open up. Lights are turned off in the back area except for a few security lights, and that will be it.
Okay, that answers a lot of questions right
Okay.
there. All right, so, and again, I believe you said office parking lot is via the north entrance?
Correct.
Let's see. All right, I guess I just need to take a more detailed look at the plans. For some reason, I thought that the engineered plans were the main plans, but I also found a lot of your office's plans to be very informative. So the whole plan set is both sets?
Correct.
Okay. And then it's a matter of, you mentioned a few things that might need to be revised. Should we be launching into a detailed review of this or wait for the revised set and the special permit? I don't want us to spin our wheels, but I don't want to hold up the review either, so that's,
The revision is to change scale calculations.
We have
And
the
to change
scale
bank-
calculations and the location for the bank.
park.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be
Parking.
much, there won't be any revising.
No.
So it's right now, I would say go ahead and do a detailed review. Just ignore where the banked parking is at present.
I
And
don't, okay.
it's hard to see, I couldn't find it either until.
I had trouble, honestly, on the engineered plans, I had, except for the line that says addition, and that was very helpful, once we highlighted that. It was difficult to see what's proposed and what's existing, but now I understand that. Okay. So there is land bank parking somewhere, and I should ignore that for now.
The land bank parking right now is in the adjacent area for the buffer. It'll be removed so they can have detention ponds. Then he's going to put them, it looks like, over here.
Is it up near
From
North
here.
Cross Road in that little envelope between the,
There's some
Sorry,
proposed,
South
there's some
Cross.
proposed at South Cross, the rest is
Went too
proposed
far.
right in through here at the rear property line, the eastern
'Cause we
property
have-
line. That has, in the adjacent area, it has to go out.
The areas where we're going to be able to keep it is in this particular area, which I can also expand to include some of it. In the configuration that they have with the retention pond, it's not tucked away in here anymore, it's moved out. I'm still able to maintain land bank parking in this particular area. I'm losing these spaces here and here, this still exists. And so it's just these few spaces that I need to kind of shift around.
They don't show up on the engineering plan.
No, he does not show those on his engineering plan. I can incorporate that and have him do that.
No. It's just that I, for some reason, thought I was only supposed to look at the engineering plan. So that helps a lot. So now I know that the land bank parking that's on the architectural plans should be ignored.
But, I mean, from an engineering standpoint, I would recommend showing the land bank parking, because on the grading plan, it shows a sloped bank on that corner there that would need to be graded to allow the parking to exist in that location.
Without access to it, looks like the access would be.
Right.
Can you speak out louder, Mr. Pickett? Brent?
Oh, I'm sorry, it doesn't look, again, you were talking about the rock, and where you're talking about having the land bank parking, part of it is, how would you get access to it? It just, from here, it looks like
I think what you'd have to do
four-wheel
is,
drive vehicles.
if the land bank parking is going into an area that would require substantial change, i.e. rock removal, blasting, whatever, we'd need to make someplace a note on the map that where land banking parking to be required, they need to come back in for a SWIP, et cetera. There are ways to solve this without.
Well, right, I mean, I guess we'll talk to Pete and Andy about whether they need to consider that now. as part of
Microphone,
their
That's what-
please.
Yeah, you're leaning too far back. Sorry, we can't
sorry.
hear that.
I was just saying, we'll have to continue the conversation about whether it needs to be included now as part of the proposal, or whether it can be.
I was going to ask that question. With mostly when we see land banked parking, it's done in a flat area. We don't want to have it be impervious yet. In this case, it's in a pretty tough spot. Slip spot. So
Yeah.
is that part of your SWIP? Or
Yes. So whatever they do for stormwater management, it needs to be sized to assume that land bank parking has been constructed.
Also for seeker purposes.
That's what I was just
Right.
gonna say.
We
You
need
don't
to,
wanna segment.
right, we need to include impacts.
So stormwater management should include plans as yes, plans.
Should
so that-
pretend, yes.
Yes, which should be for the, as I often say, worst or best case scenario, because he so successfully needs those parking spaces. So it should, and to avoid secret segmentation, all that should be considered in terms of environmental impacts.
Yes.
But it should be considered so they wouldn't have to come back and revise the SWIP in the future. Got it.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Mr. Turner, how much space is between those buildings?
20 feet.
These buildings here, you have 20 feet.
So that's enough for 2 cars to park and pass
Yes,
each
side by
other?
side, and then you back out.
What size vehicles normally access these buildings? Are you expecting like moving vans, or is it typically more of like a pickup truck or a personal vehicle?
Most cases, it's a pickup truck or it would be a small van.
Okay.
I know that's what I have seen going in and out of it.
Or a 10-foot U-Haul truck, something like that.
It'd be a smaller vehicle. I know we made sure that you can accommodate this and travel through with a fire truck,
Right.
because that's the requirement. So that would be the largest vehicle that someone could bring back in there, but it's not something that has happened yet.
Is that an industry standard to have room for 2 but with no through lane in between?
This is what has been based upon the standards that I know Scott has pulled together in regards to the information he has gathered in regard to
You
development.
can't travel through if there are 2 people there.
So what you're saying, if you're trying to get, like if your unit is all the way down here and 2 people have parked side by side, you're not going to be able to get to your unit
Or if
unless
there's
you
an
get around them.
emergency. I mean, I guess, does the road go all the way around them?
No, the road comes through and then terminates at each one of these locations. And so you're only allowed to pull in and then back out.
Okay, well, so that's why I asked if that was industry standard, but we'll refer to the fire department
Yeah.
and see what they say as well.
Normally, you would see an access road behind. That's the usual way. So that people, when they go through, could turn around, could go around, could go around, could go around. Because they're trying to preserve and not blast rock at this point. That's why I believe that there's been no road proposed back there.
It's making me think of those, when you go to a gas station and they're too close and you can't ever get through because 2 cars are parked, and if there's no way around, again, I just want the fire department to weigh in.
No, it's something for the board to consider.
I think it's a lot less traffic in one of these.
That's true.
Yeah.
Also, I don't want to reveal too much about Mr. Hutchins' business, but he's told us that he has two major users of the site. One is Bard College. I don't know what they're storing. I have no idea. There's documents retention places, but maybe that's what's there. I don't know. And the other is a person with classic cars. And I said, oh, are the cars brought in on? No, they're driven out upon occasion. So there's also lots of people just use storage for their stuff, whatever that is. But thus far, we asked him in a couple of offline meetings if there have been any conflict points, and thus far, no. I think he said that one case there was someone who wanted to get to his spot, and it was kind of blocked, and the two customers maybe didn't get along in their verbal discussion, but that ultimately one finally just moved his car, let the other one through, and all that. It was one of those of, can't you just wait 30 minutes? No, I can't. I need to get my space now. So, but otherwise, that noted, it is easier, I believe, to get in and around the existing or the newer buildings that were constructed rather than maybe all these, mainly because of that lack of access around it. So, and again, when we circulate to the fire department, it could be that they'll say that they need access around it because if if their car's in through here and they can't get through, but we'll let the fire department discuss that or weigh in on that.
Right, because we don't have special use standards for storage facilities, so
It's not something that's contemplated other than just general commercial under our code. Liz, more questions, comments?
Couple things. So one is I'm looking at building 7, and that's sort of a travel lane. I understand this is a pretty low traffic site. Is that part of a through road situation there?
That is a through road situation
is?
similar
Okay.
to what you have here.
That's what I thought.
It allows someone to pull over, and then, of course, you do have to pull into the opposite lane in order to get
Right.
around somebody.
Sure. And then the same thing over with 5A and 5B. I see a travel lane. Then there's kind of like a little strip. Is that like sidewalk? Or just...
When you say a little strip, you mean this?
No, it's more parallel to the length of the building.
Yeah, it runs along the front of the building. There's like a little, I doubt very much that's a strip of grass. If you look at 5A and 5B, just along the southern line of those buildings,
Yeah, we're also looking at the engineer.
we're looking at the engineered drawing. Hang on.
can we combine?
Actually, on your architectural drawing, there's no such line, so maybe that's just...
I will need to check with Mark Rominski, because from the original intent, that was right up against that line. I don't know if he's ever
now
been
I'm seeing
shifted it
that.
back.
It shows
I'll have
two
to
different
check.
ways on the different plans, so that's...
Correct.
Okay.
So I'll have to validate that with Mark.
Okay. And honestly, I understand there are issues with South Cross Road in terms of using that, so I appreciate that you guys are only intending for that gate to be for emergency access, but I know we kind of had discussion about the fact that it could be kind of convenient for the folks using the northernmost storage buildings, but it's not worth it, so.
Well, as I had stated, according to Scott, it's not a good area for him to be able to control access.
Nope.
And so he does not want to,
It's too
allow that for
remote from his
customer
office.
security.
You'll
Right.
still need the highway super to sign off on the emergency access.
I would recommend talking to him sooner rather than later.
Because you're changing it from a residential driveway to a
this
potential
square doesn't
commercial.
exist. Okay, so then off of building 7, off of the southeast corner, there's sort of a little square on the engineering plan that doesn't exist. There's nothing there. It's just lines that need to be straightened out.
Yeah,
Okay.
those are lines.
That's helpful.
Any other questions?
Not
Andy,
now.
questions? Further comments?
I just want to raise, the idea of building stormwater in a road within the adjacent area is a little surprising to me. I appreciate it. I'm glad that DEC is working with you. I guess I'm just curious if there's any correspondence from them that we could see that might indicate their acceptance, and if there's any special construction requirements to do that work in the adjacent area.
I'll have to look
That's-
in-
that-
excuse me, I'll
that's-
have to look into that.
Yeah.
I know they had the meeting, there was verbal approvals at that point in time,
Mhm.
or acceptance, I should
I was
say.
gonna say not
I
yet.
believe they're, when this is circulated, it would be circulated to them
Yes,
at that
it will be.
point.
Right.
And so they would be them responding at that point in time.
I mean, just laying it out, Tad and I, first when we saw what they were doing, we're like, DEC is okay with this? Yes. So I take applicants at their word, because if they're wrong, DEC will let us know.
Right.
But I was surprised too. That's a lot of activity going in the adjacent area.
And it's a CEA.
And this is the beginning of a critical environmental area. That noted, this area is somewhat degraded in terms of quality.
Sure.
It's got heavy tree canopy, which means it's not utilized as much typically by the endangered, threatened, and rare species, because they want to have some solar penetration here and there.
Mhm.
But it does stay wet. I mean, it's wet.
Right.
So that's why I was surprised, because when you have that much activity where things can go right into the wetland, sedimentation, et cetera, they don't usually like that. And
Right.
you're talking about cars using this, which they don't usually like this. So,
Right.
but we'll get to the DEC at some point.
Mhm.
So, and because they were pretty tough. Ironically, they were very tough about the buildings. I mean, what
Correct.
we approved actually was less than what was originally proposed in the adjacent area from the first application. He'd already scaled it back and then didn't build it anyway because of other measures they wanted to, for protection. So we'll see what happens when we get to the DEC. But good point.
Other than that, when you go to the fire department, I guess I would just ask them which direction they think they would be coming from. The vehicle movement plan shows them coming from the south. Maybe that's the direction they come from. I'm not sure. But it looks like a turn driving south may not work on the northern entrance. And you might need to update your maneuvering plan to show them
Okay.
coming through the south entrance.
The firehouse is actually on South Cross Road, up in the eastern section.
Right. So Statsburg Fire was merged in with Roosevelt. And so there's a Roosevelt that's up on South Cross. There's Roosevelt that's on Cardinal. Then where Statsburg Fire used to be in Statsburg, the hamlet of Statsburg, is now Roosevelt. So potentially the two closest firehouses would be on South Cross. That's closest, but you know what South Cross looks like.
They'd
A
still have to
snake.
probably go to the end of and turn on to 9.
That's what I'm guessing.
Yep.
So Statsburg in the middle of Roosevelt that's in Statsburg itself, the hamlet, probably has a clearer shot because it can take Old Post Road 9 and it's there.
Right.
So I would imagine that most of the fire trucks will be coming from the north rather than the south.
Are all the stations manned?
Pardon me?
Do they have people at every station now?
They have people, someone is at every station.
Wow.
No, sometimes just one or two.
Sometimes it's the same person over
Yeah,
and
over
over
and over
again.
The two locations that are the busiest in terms of, well, I should say three. The Cream Street, the new 9G location, and Cardinal Road are their three biggest, and so therefore there are always people there. The one on South Cross actually only has probably one or two people. Same
They
thing
all live like
right by, that's why.
there.
And Statsburg is similar. It's not a huge building, so there's less people there, but more than, the smallest one is on South Cross.
Yep.
So, but I still think I think the trucks would probably most be coming from the north. So it's a good point about looking at the radius. Liz, back again.
Sorry.
No.
So north of South Cross Road, is it all residential? Sorry, I got the directions right at least.
With the exception of one entity, there's a restaurant bar there.
On the corner?
No, right? in the-
No, further in.
Wow.
1 mile in is the
The
Red
the
Rooster.
yeah.
The Red Rooster, wow. Is it a little Red Rooster? Or?
No, just a Red
No,
Rooster.
just Red
It's a place that I've never been because it doesn't look like it might like types like me.
But it's a lovely place, and they have gorgeous grounds. They used to host
Residential.
softball leagues and Pop Warner, and they've got like professional ball fields in the back.
Okay.
But otherwise, everybody else is residential.
And do we, I guess, no, never mind.
Anything else, Andy, right now?
No, that's it for me.
Victoria?
No further comments.
Let me start to my right. Chris, comments?
No further comments.
Your voice is getting raspy too. Ann?
Yeah.
Catching.
So you guys have been in operation for like 4 years now?
Yep.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
2015, yeah.
What?
I must say, in all that time, I've never seen a stack up of any kind of cars, or, you'll see a car or two in the front, but I've never seen it maxed out. It's interesting. I'll be curious to hear what the fire department says about the buildings stacked with no back
That's my
exit.
No.
That's the only thing I'm seeing that I'm not quite sure if that would fly. Couldn't they be laid out the other way, like north-south? And then create a kind of like you have.
Well, that's the way we had it originally. And what we are encountering is because the edge of the wetland buffer is right here.
Oh.
It did not provide you with very much space, and
You
so
couldn't
you
get your
couldn't
20
get the
feet?
buildings and circulation around it to work and keep the buildings out of the buffer.
Okay.
I know when speaking with the fire department, originally it was Statsburg Fire Department, when we were doing this lower portion here, the way they explained it to me was that the trucks would come around, they would get to this point, they would fight fires from this side, or they would be fighting fires from this side. They would never go down between the buildings. And so in that, with taking that thought into continuing it, they'd be pulling along here and they would be bringing hoses down here. They're not going to actually pull their trucks in in order to fight a fire.
Okay. Thank you for that. Otherwise, no further comment.
Thank you. Ms. Wasser? Stephanie?
I'm going to wait to hear from DEC and the fire department.
Thank
I
you.
don't have any other comments.
Brent?
Yes, looks like you've got work to do, so we'll wait too.
Ann?
I have no additional questions.
So, I don't really either. We have to do some revisions that need to go on, and we need to work to the special use permit. Typically, if it's site plan and special use permit, sometimes it's just a special use permit required for an accessory structure that escrow is established separately, but typically, we've only taken one escrow for both. But I'll speak to the consultants, if that can help allay Mr. Hutchinson's fears. Otherwise, I think the most important things I heard tonight were two, the stormwater management, the SWIP must include the land banking areas because that's going to be crucial. And the second would be looking at the entrance for southbound fire trucks in your northern entrance to make sure that that's adequate for them. Whereas before, this might not have been used except to fight a fire right in an office here, they would have sat out. Now they may want to use this as opposed to going around. Well, again, that's mostly for the fire department. I think again, that's why I mentioned it first, was for stormwater management, including the land banking. And you'll have to show where those are. Then some differences need to be resolved that exist right now between the civil and the engineered plans and the civil plan. That, I think, would make the review go more quickly, as well as be less expensive for the consultants if we can clarify that. I like the landscaping that you've added along the way. And elevations, you said, are being revised based on?
I have asked that Trekkie revise, it's the one building, it's
right there.
Yeah, building number 5. Right now, they show it being a continuous building where we're actually breaking it. And so it's 2 separate buildings. And so it's...
I was going to ask if it exceeded the 100-foot.
But that's why they're breaking it up.
No,
That's why
I thought it looked like a gap.
it
it's got a
seems to, it's
heavier
just a matter of
line there.
clarifying.
Okay.
So, this was, like I said, this is the first meeting on this. Do you want to make some revisions to the plans and then get back to us,
Yes.
and then we'll start the process up? Do you have any questions for us?
I just want to make sure, for dealing with the highway department and the fire department, I can contact them directly. I don't have to go through the town.
Yeah, no, we'll circulate it anyway.
We're going to be circulating to them, but you're allowed to reach out to them.
Of course.
Okay, I just want to make sure I don't want to
No,
step on.
no stepping on toes. What we'd like is if you have any correspondence with them, whether email or written, it's nice if you can send that to us, because it goes
Okay.
into the record. As Andy was asking earlier, do you have any correspondence from the DEC? We'd be asking the same thing. If people come up to us and say, I already talked to the fire department, they're all okay, well, I need proof of that. So, that's all. Otherwise, we look forward to processing the review. It's nice to have you back in after all this time to work with. And that's it. We'll wait to hear from you. Thank
Okay,
you.
Not a problem, thank you.
Colleagues, I want to thank you for the intelligence of your comments, the thoughtfulness of them, and as always, for when you agree with someone, thank you for saying I agree with the comments made earlier, because that helps applicants know that everyone's interested in the same process, same points.
Rather not.
We have a number of waivers to go through. The consultants can depart if you want to, I think, yes?
Okay, and just the last couple comments about some revisions before we get the process started. Does that mean we should hold off on thorough review, or we should go ahead with a thorough
Well,
code review?
Robert, what would you like to do? If you're going to revise these,
I
the
don't want to
revisions,
spin our wheels and spend money if things are, so that's.
the
my
revisions you're making are primarily to the land, the banked parking stalls.
Okay.
And some plantings, wait,
We have land banking, dealing with the land banking. I just need to make sure proper locations are for
right,
the snow room, and
Snow
redo the
storage.
calculations for
for scale, that's fully it.
And then also provide, or look at the flow coming south on Route 9, getting
Right.
into the north entrance.
So,
I mean-
would you like them to hold off until you
I would
submit?
like to be able to have a good review done, so that way we can, provide, pretty much answer all your comments.
So start now.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's the answer.
just wanted to double
Thank
check
you.
that.
Thank you. Thank you for
Because
making a
after that,
good decision,
The
too.
comments are probably going to be minor from there. on
Right.
out.
Yes, you can get through the substantive ones immediately and then keep on going. And that way you don't have to, you can take their comments and make any revisions you want to, plus your land banking revisions, et cetera, et cetera. Great. Thank you. Have a
Okay,
nice night.
Thank you.
Are we open the box?
Okay, we have a series of
Yeah, you don't need us.
waivers.
No.
Not for these. Thank you. Have a nice night. Good to see you, Andy.
See you too. Good to be here.
Where's the agenda? Supposed to be following.
Oh, Calabro, Joseph, and Regina are next.
The next would be a site plan waiver for, there we are, thank you. Joseph and Regina Calabro. They're seeking waiver to install new windows. Their location is 23 Cromwell Place. This is not visible from either historic site or the river. We have the recommendation from the zoning administrator. Who has this file?
I do.
Thank you.
Site plan waiver, Town Code Section 108-9.4C2, Resolution 2019-21. Whereas the request for site plan waiver has been made to the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board by Joseph and Regina Calabro for the replacement of 15 windows and sliding door on the existing single-family home, and whereas, therefore be it resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives site plan requirements for the proposed changes as described in the building permit application dated May 1st, 2019, and the request for a waiver of site plan received by the Planning Department on May 13, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda will be a site plan waiver request for the Hosack Partners 1 LLC. This is actually located at 14 Vanderbilt Lane. This is an historic structure that's going to be adjacent to, and the parcel that's next door, that's owned by the same family, is also an historic structure. It's above Bard Park, and it's a McKim and White design. The applicants filled in the original in-ground pool, made some changes that were approved by waiver. They're putting in a new in-ground pool into the adjacent site that's, again, owned by one. We have the recommendation from the zoning administrator, because even it's not visible from any of the historic sites across 9, but it is part of an overall historic site. But it doesn't change the character of the neighborhood, essentially. Any questions?
No.
Who has this file?
I do.
Yay.
Site plan waiver, Town Code Section 108-9.4C2. June 5th, 2019, resolution number 2019-22. Whereas an application requesting a waiver of site plan has been made to the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board by Robert DuPont, representing Mr. Hilliker of Hosack Partners 1 LLC, on May 14th, 2019, for property located at 14 Vanderbilt Lane, the Town of Hyde Park. And whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives site plan requirements for the file entitled Hosack Cottage 1 LLC regarding the specific request as submitted by architect Robert DuPont to the Planning Board on May 14th, and in the building permit application dated May 7th, and plans last revised May 24th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a site plan waiver for James and Deborah Agrawal. This is for a new home construction on a previously approved subdivision located at 84 River Road. This site is directly visible from the Hudson River. It is not visible from either one of the historic sites. However, if you look at the intent of the zoning district for waterfront, homes are intended to be manorial estates. This wouldn't qualify as an estate because the subdivision isn't that big. They're 1 acre parcels. But I think you could argue that the house is certainly impressive and manorial.
Isn't it in the SAS?
It's in the SAS, because it's, when you're on the river, you'll be able to see this house
Oh, yeah.
directly. But I think that's.
It's a beautiful house.
I was gonna say, it's actually a very nice looking house, so.
Yes, it's very blue.
Very blue. Being a blue lover, it'll fit right in. I will be a neighbor, so it'll fit right
Very
in with
blue, yeah.
my
It fits more
neighborhood.
of the ambiance of the area versus the one that's right on the river.
I agree with you 100%. Who has this file?
I do.
Thank you, Chris.
Site plan waiver, Town Code Section 108-9.4C2, resolution number 2018-65, whereas an application requesting a waiver of site plan has been made to the Town of the Hyde Park Planning Board by James and Deborah Agrawal on September 14, 2018, for a property located at 84 River Road in the Town of Hyde Park. Whereas, now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Hyde Park Planning Board hereby waives site plan requirements for the file entitled Agrawal New Single Family regarding the specific request as received September 14th, 2018, in the Building Department application for this project dated April 3rd, 2019.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The motion carries. Next item on the agenda will be setting a public hearing for Sire of Duchess, also known as Lands of Sire. This is Eric, as in Eric Baxter spelled backwards, in case you're curious. So the applicants started substantial construction but have not been able to complete because they have no tenant. We are required to set a public hearing in case there's new information whenever we're doing an extension of time in which to start or complete construction. Anybody have any questions?
Nope.
No.
May I get a motion to set the public hearing for June 19th?
So moved. Second.
One of them seconded, one of them moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is sign permit for freestanding sign for K&J Automotive. This is a freestanding parcel. Ms. Hins Schaefer, who designed it, was sitting in the audience. I told her we have the recommendation from TAD. It's downlit. It's already an existing freestanding sign. It actually is an improvement over what's there now, in my opinion.
Yep.
So, anybody have any questions?
No.
Who has this file?
I do. Town of Hyde Park Planning Board Resolution Recommendation for issuance of sign permit pursuant to Town Code Section 108-24.3A4D, K&J Automotive. Resolution number 2019-18, whereas, be it further resolved, the board hereby recommends the zoning administrator issue the sign permit for K&J Automotive.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The motion carries. Last item on the agenda is a new sign for Minuteman Press. Minuteman Press will be relocating from its current location or current site on 9 over to 9G. They will be actually in the same parcel as Shelley's Deli, and I believe either tanning or karate, something. Anyway, they're making a big move. The sign is co-compliant in terms of dimensions. It also actually follows the same design unity that the other signs have on the site.
good.
A miracle.
Wow.
Imagine. Because we have a positive recommendation, a very positive
That's
recommendation.
That's planning at work.
It's true, it's true. So anybody have any questions?
Nope.
Who has this file?
I do.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Resolution, recommendation for issuance of sign permit pursuant to Town Code Section 108-24.3A4D. Minuteman Press, one tenant panel on freestanding sign, 473 Violet Avenue. June 5th, 2019, Resolution 2019-23. Whereas, now therefore be resolved, the planning board hereby recommends the zoning administrator issue the sign permit for Minuteman Press freestanding sign tenant panel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. May I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
There.
We'll have to remember to do that
Here's
more
recycled
often.
paper.
So,
Oh, my God.